Oh, wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for tuning in once again. All right. This is part three of the series, The Real Slave Trade. Today we're going to show another source where they got slaves for the American colonies, all the way back into the very beginning, early 1500s, up to the 17, even 1800s. And that is Asia. We're talking about a trans-Pacific slave trade, a real historic one. And yes, this affected many of the original peoples of Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. We're talking about Swarthy, indigenous, so-called Negro people, so-called Black Asiatics. A little known slave trade. This really wasn't taught to us in school. This really wasn't taught to me personally when I was a kid in school, the way we're going to talk about it today. And when we're looking at the pictures of these people so you can see who really was being enslaved. And we're going to learn that the word Chino does not necessarily mean what we think of Chino today. A lot of people think automatically a Chinese person, a modern Chinese person, but that's not what they were referring to. In the 1500s, 1600s, in the Spanish colonies. Make sure to check out part one of this series where we show who the Spanish and Portuguese were enslaving as well. That's the American Indians. Then you can go on to part two where you can see another source of slaves, which was Europe. All their undesirable people they were sending over to the American colonies. And again, today we're going to show a third source, and that was Asia. Before we begin, I just want to make something clear. We're going to see a lot of pictures. A lot of people are going to see, well, those are people who came from out of Africa at some point, and that's conjecture. A lot of these people, most of these people, we've shown it. We've done a video on the Andaman Islanders. Their haplogroup does not go back to Africa. It's actually an Asian haplogroup. They are Asians. They are part of the original Asians. Have nothing to do with Africa. And that goes for most of the people we're going to see in the pictures today. The same people that were being enslaved by the Spanish and the Portuguese, Moors, Sephardic Jews, New Christians, Catholics. Yeah. So-called black on black. Yeah, that's what was going on in Asia. Let's get into it. Video real quick. We're going to show a couple of images here so we can break these spells, our prejudices, get a clear perspective of what really happened, when we're talking about Asians, right? And them being brought over here, during colonial times. Who exactly were they bringing? Negroes were all over the world. So-called Negroes were all over the world, right? And, learning about, the Black Europeans, so-called Black Indians, things they never told us. We're a little bit more open, now and acceptable of certain things. I know there's still a lot of people out there that are, prejudiced and, you just want to label people tags and then call people Asian or Mongol or anything like that, But what I want to show today, a part of history also that they never tell us about, that really doesn't get mentioned in school or anything like that, even though a lot of us know about the indentured servants and things like that that were brought over to the Caribbean, Mexico, California, South America, back in colonial times, all the way to like the 1800s, even 1900s still happening, actually, I would say, Moluccas, indigenous people, the Moluccas, as they're called, Moluccas people, again, from Southeast Asia. All right, so real quick, so we can get a clear perspective of what I'm talking about. So what I just showed you is the Moluccas people, or the Maluku Islands, the Maluku Island people, right? This is in Indonesia. All right, let me just back up so you guys can see where we are. Right on top of Australia. Papua New Guinea's right here. We got the Philippines over here. Borneo, All right, we're going to see a lot of pictures from there. Malaysia, Sumatra, Java, Jakarta, capital, Javanese, Timor. We're going to see people from all these places today. We're going to see a lot of pictures. A lot of them, I couldn't determine what island they're from, but they're from all these areas. The Ambon people, as you guys can see, Ambon, study them. Very melanated people. We're going to get into the Philippines a lot. Look how it says here, Negros. So I'm going to show you guys a lot of pictures from a lot of the indigenous population in these places. So many islands here, a lot of places, a lot of people they never showed us. Coming from Asia, this is Borneo. Let's see, Borneans. Over here is Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. So again, the Maluku Islands, we're going to see a lot of pictures from the Maluku Islands and all these areas around here. Even up here, look, North Maluku, this is all connected. When you see Malakus or Malukas, that's what they're talking about. Just want to show you guys also, there's so many islands out here. As it keeps going, see the Solomon Islands. Over here, Samoa. You got Fiji. We're going to see a lot of pictures from Fiji, the Fijians. Samoa, right, islands. You got the Marshall Islands. All these have people, melanated people, Micronesians, the Micronesian Islands, Polynesians, all right, Guam. Well, these are so-called Negro people, as they would be classified in America as so-called Negro. And these are the Chinos we're about to read. These are the Chinos they were bringing across the Pacific, bringing them over to the colonies, the Spanish colonies in America. So these are from the Maluku Islands. This is right here, this couple, or Moluccas, and as they're called too. All right, get a great look, as you guys can see. These are not Africans. All right, now take a look at this. Over here in the left, we got an indigenous elder from the island of Papua New Guinea, Southeast Asia, South Pacific, and very much resembling the phenotype of LeBron James. These are the indigenous people of the Papua New Guinea area. And I'm going to show you guys today that these are the people they were calling Chinos. A lot of these so-called Chinos were people from Papua New Guinea. This is actually the one I found on the internet, and I changed it up a little bit, but this is what I found on the internet, so somebody else had made the connection. Not saying that LeBron is from Papua New Guinea, but he does have a similar look. And I want to show some old statues here. We're going to show a couple of them. And as you guys can see, just to compare, this is an afro they're depicting. You see the phenotype and you see the afro, right? Talking about the original people. And this is an Ainu woman from Japan. This is, again, old pictures. I colorized. I found this very old picture here from the 1800s. I colorized it. This is what we got. And it said Ainu woman. Another statue here, as you guys can see. Compare the hair of these Buddhas. Just another one right here to compare. As you guys can see, look at the hair. You see? We got another one right here. I mean, just look at the phenotype. That looks like a lot of people I grew up seeing in Boston. And then look at her hair. I say her, I could be a male, but look at the hair. Again, the woolly curly hair. And we got here a Champa king of the Vietnam old Champa culture. All right, and you see the phenotype. Just like when you're looking at the Olmec heads, what's the difference? You know, you look at this and, you know, got to do the same. You got to see. And of course, you got a beard and a mustache, you see. These are the people that the Sephardic, Moorish, Jewish pirates were enslaving and snatching up, buying, selling, trading all over this area right here. We're going to talk about India too, this whole area. A lot of the eastern part of India, even though they went up on this side too, A lot of this side, though, on the eastern part, was raided. There's all these coastlines raided. They had help with local indigenous people who had wars with other tribes. They were already enslaving other nations and tribes on their own before the Portuguese there got, but the Portuguese and Sephardic Spanish Jews, they went really crazy with it. Remember, these are so-called black folks too, enslaving other so-called black folks. As shout out to Con Drop, as Con Drop says, more on more war. Okay, so I really want to emphasize this. I know a lot of people, when they watch these videos, a lot of people, they haven't taken the journey. We've been here 5 years. We've already debunked the out of Africa theories. Those are theories, not facts. They're basing all that stuff based on ape bones. The bones they talking about in Africa come from apes, not modern human type. They're not modern Homo sapiens sapiens. Just do the research. All right. As you guys can see, we're talking about a whole different area right here. When they told us about slavery and people getting enslaved in a transatlantic slave trade, remember? They told us it was on this side of the world, West Africa, and they were bringing all these people over here, right? They never really emphasized this side, the Pacific. They never emphasized this massive trans-Pacific slave trade. These so-called Chinos, so-called Negros, they never told us about. All right, you guys gotta break the spell. This ain't personal. Gotta graduate from 1993. Pan-Africanism, that's been debunked. You guys gotta catch up. So we're gonna learn a lot about the Trans-Pacific slave trade today. We're gonna learn about the Manila galleons, okay? The flotilla between Manila and Acapulco, or Mexico and the Philippines. The Manila galleons are very famous, and you actually study this trade from Asia, Trans-Pacific trade, right? They kind of sugarcoat everything. They just talk about how they were bringing over exotic goods, porcelain, ivory, spices, and all this other stuff except slaves. They kind of sugarcoat it. The archaeology of Manila galleons. Manila galleons are the stuff of legend. Active for 250 years, they were the vehicle for people, products, and ideas between Asia and Spanish world. Among the biggest ships of their time, they were built to endure one of the most difficult navigations, the crossing of the Pacific Ocean, which sometimes lasted half a year, right? 6 months in the ocean. A middle passage, guys. I'm gonna show you who was going through this middle passage on the way to New Spain, Mexico. The Manila galleon in California. Yeah, it was going all the way to California. This Manila galleon, all right? I'm gonna show you what it was doing there. It was literally transporting slaves, guys. Again, when you read about this stuff, they don't tell you about any slaves. The Cebu Acapulco galleon trade. Next page, it says the Manila Acapulco galleon trade. The Manila Acapulco galleon trade is the more popular name of the Philippine-Mexico galleon trade. The ships used in this trade were called the Manila galleons. They were among the richest trade ships for their time, competing with the Silver Fleet of Peru and the India Fleet of Portugal. On their way to New Spain, as Mexico was called then, the galleons' cargo holds were filled with silk, spices, porcelain, cotton, musk, wax, and curiosities of the East, which were sold at very high prices at the market fair in Acapulco. I guess by curiosities of the East, they mean the slaves, because they literally left them out, guys. I'm going to show you what was the main profit of this Manila galleons. It was slaves. We're going to read the history. I mean, everywhere you read about the Manila galleons, you know, they don't really talk about the slaves. It says they were Spanish trading ships for 2.5 centuries, all right, 250 years, linked to Spanish crown's royalty of New Spain. That's 250 years of slavery, guys, over from Asia to America. With her Asian territories collectively known as the Spanish East Indies across the Pacific Ocean, the ships made 1 or 2 round-trip voyages per year between the ports of Acapulco and Manila. The name of the galleon changed to reflect the city that the ship sailed from. The term Manila galleon can also refer to the trade route itself between Acapulco and Manila, which lasted from 1565 to 1815, guys. When did they outlaw importation of slaves? 1809. We're still doing it in 1815 on the Pacific. So where's the Africans? I'm going to show you what I mean, all right? We already saw part one of this and part two, right? Where we showed two sources of slaves that was covering these years as well. Now we're going to show you another source that's covering these years. The Manila galleon sailed the Pacific for 250 years, bringing to the Americas cargoes of luxury goods such as spices and porcelain in exchange for New World silver. All right. And again, they're not going to say nothing about any people being transported, any slaves. All right. They don't want you to know. They want you to think everybody was brought from Africa that was a so-called slave. These are Aeta children, 1930s Philippines, the Aeta, very ancient people in the Philippines, no doubt. You know, all of them have these features with the woolly, curly hair, very swarthy. And these people were also being labeled Chinos as they were being taken in this middle passage through the trans-Pacific slave trade, colonial times. These beautiful children right here. Take a look. It says an Ayeta woman and a child from the Philippines, also from the Ayeta tribe. They are thought to be among the earliest inhabitants of the Philippines, preceding the Austronesian migrations. Before the Austronesians, these are the people who were there anciently. They're not Africans. They've been there since creation. They're original to that part of the plane, the earth, the world. All right, so we're going to talk about, Filipinos as well, and how they were, how they had a huge slave market in Manila in the Philippines. Just want to remind everybody, again, we just saw some pictures of some Philippines, but I want to show some more drawings here now, get more perspective. It says here, exhibit of a racist cartoon depictions of Filipinos. All right, depictions of Filipinos. And it says here, Imperial Dreams. And you can see here the Filipino, You see how they're depicting the Filipino, right? Go to another image here. This again, these are Filipinos. Another image and drawing. So it's here Filipino Negro and Southern Negro. This franchise Negro. And it says, make the Filipino free, give him self-government, Dr. Jekyll Bryant. And it says, the Southern Negro must not rule, he must not vote, by order of Mr. Hyde Bryan. All right, you see that? And it says, for one Negro and against the other, Dr. Jekyll Bryan and Mr. Hyde Bryan. All right, very interesting and very telling, right? And then I got another one here. This is Uncle Sam, right? It has Puerto Rico. Very interesting one. Look at Puerto Rico, right? You see how Hawaii? That's Cuba. You see all, right? As you can see, that we're depicting Ladroni. It says, and Philippines right here. Philippines, Ladroni, Cuba, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, right? Also called Negros, right? Philippines included. There's another one here. It says political cartoons and Filipinos. And this one right here is the Filipinos. You can see in his feathered headdress or whatever that is from his head. Then you got Hawaii, Cuba, right? Very racist. But see how they're depicting because they knew, right? The original Filipinos. Here's another one. It says Philippines and it shows this guy right here. Again, not Africans. These are not Africans. This is another one. It says here, the Boston Sunday Globe, the Boston Globe, expansion before and after. And it shows the Filipino before expansion, right? And then it says the Filipino after expansion, all dressed up, right? You see how they're drawing? That's the Filipino. And shout out to 432 The Drop Radio. Learn a lot from Con Drop. And it says here, images from the past, stereotyping Filipino immigrants in California. All right, from the Santa Clara University. And look at the image they got here. All right, Uncle Sam holding a Filipino baby, right? A Filipino baby. Information wanted. It says, Uncle Sam, now that I've got it, what am I going to do with it? You see, they don't know. They brought them all over here. They brought who? The so-called Filipinos, so-called Negritos. so-called Chinos. We're gonna read. All right, this is the Filipino. Break the spell. And this is an awesome pic. Wanted to definitely find another Fiji with a so-called Afro pic, right? Fixing up their hair, and I found this one awesome, as you guys can see. All right, you see her hair, the woolly, curly hair. All right, this is a Fijian woman. Awesome pic right here. This girl is from Sumatra, Indonesia. They wore these type of headgears, looking like one of the Star Wars characters from a different planet, right? But that's what I'm saying. Where do they get the ideas in those movies, right? Just from the tribal people of this earth. Here we have Rais Monoarfa, the Prince of Kerajan, Gorontalo, posing in 1870. Later, he became Dojo Gugu Kota. He died in Manado. All right, Rais, the Prince of Kerajan. Look at him. All right, this is an Asian. Look at him, so swarty. Look at his phenotype. So very cool picture. He looks like a pretty serious young man. And here we have people in the Rubiana village of New Georgia, Western Solomon Islands. Solomon Islanders, all right? Again, Solomon Islanders, indigenous Solomon Islanders, so-called Negros. And again, being enslaved by the Portuguese and Spanish, being brought to Americas and being labeled so-called Chinos. Chinos. Here's your Chinos, guys. Here we have Sri Sultan Hakem Kubuwono the sixth, also spelled Hamen Kubuwana the sixth, was the sixth sultan of Yogyakarta, of the Yogyakarta Sultanate, who reigned from 1855 to 1877. Javanese, all right? This is a Javanese monarch, all right? Javanese monarch, you guys can see, so swarty, royalty, original Javanese, so-called Negro, so-called Chino. We have 3 employees of the Dutch East Indies Public Works Service in Lombok, Indonesia. Lombok, Indonesia. Look at these. Indonesians, so-called Negro people. Indonesians, so-called Chinos. Here we have the princess of the Mindanaos, dancers in the Philippines. Look at her. Look at her. Filipino dancer. Look, princess. Princess of the Mindanao. She's a princess, guys. She's a princess, an Asian princess. Look at that. From the Philippines. Beautiful. All right, beautiful. Awesome picture I colorized. Love these pictures. The princess of the Mindanao's dancers. Go ahead and read this book right here, which is called Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, From Chinos to Indians by Tatiana Sejas. We just hear Chinos to Indians, so a lot of people like to kind of generalize and assume when they're talking about Chinos, they're talking about modern day Chinese or people from China, looking people, pale skin, straight hair, what we picture of Chinese today. But actually, as it says in this book, I'm gonna read it to you right now in the introduction. All right, it says, during the last 16th and 17th centuries, countless slaves from culturally diverse communities in the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia journeyed to Mexico on the ships of the Manila galleon. Again, from where? From Southeast Asia, all right? Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, all right? Not from China. They're not bringing these people from China or Mongolia, all right? Not China or Mongolia. They're coming from the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. Now that we understand, the book is telling us these people were coming from the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, not China, not Korea, not all those places up there, not Mongolia, Southeast Asia people, okay? So get that in your heads right now. So-called Chinos, again, from Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. So this is the type of people we're gonna go over it today. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. With these images, I colorized some of them, and just so we can get a clear perspective. This is another picture of Buddha right here, as you can see. Another statue, of Buddha. All right, again, ancient, Asia, right? Ancient Asia. Now, right here, we got 2 South Indian women and a girl. All right, so again, remember the book said they were coming from the Indian subcontinent, Hindus, right? They were bringing them over here during colonial times. And then we got this brother right here. He's a tribal man from New Caledonia, right? New Caledonia. This is in Southeast Asia, just like the book just told us that they were calling Chinos. And what did the book say? In that book, we're going to read it. Now, this image I thought was very, it says here, why are slanted eyes only associated with Asian people, right? So again, kill the prejudices. Just because somebody has so-called slanted eyes or Asian eyes doesn't mean, they're Mongols or Chinese, all right? And the left, we got a Dinka girl. She's from Africa. The Dinkas, that's what they look like. On the right here, we got a Khoisan girl, one of the original people in Africa. The Khoisans are one of the oldest people in Africa. And they'll tell you they didn't originate there. They came from somewhere else up in the north. I would say, in my research, and I hope to do a future video on the Khoisan, I believe they were coming from the Caucasus, Caucasian area, the original Caucasians that went down into eventually Africa. But, for now, let's leave it as my opinion, right? So don't worry, you know how I work. Eventually, I'm going to have the sources. We're going to try to go ahead and unlock that mystery. But I just wanted to make that clear. These are two Africans right here. As you can see, the one on the right, very light skinned. The one on the left, very dark. Even though they got the slanted eyes, they look kind of like each other. But you see the different shades, right? Even in Africa, right? Even in Africa. This is a Tamil girl from Ceylon, Sri Lanka. Again, remember that book told us that they were bringing these people and labeling them Indians, these Chinos, so-called Chinos from Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. This is a Tamil girl. Right here, we got also other people from Sri Lanka, indigenous Sri Lankan people. All right, again, Southeast Asian, Indian subcontinent, Southern Indian men, southern part of Hindustan, as it was called before, today known as India. And that's an indigenous person from India. All right, so real quick, as you guys see here, it says Flores. This is the Flores Islands. And the Flores Island people, I'm going to show you this again, Indonesia. Let's go to a picture of the Flores Islands people real quick. It says here, Flores Islands, Indonesia, portrait of a woman with water holder on head, Leloba Larantuka, East, Nusa Tenggara, 1928. All right, so take a really good look here. As you guys can see, so-called Negro people, right? This is indigenous people of that island. This is a Filipino. It says here, Abago Bo Cotabato, Mindanao, from the Mindanao region in the Philippines, right? In the Philippines. Mindanao region in the Philippines. And then we got these two right here, also from the Philippines. It says Hunters with Bows and Arrows, Philippines, 1890. All right, take a very good look. As you can see, when they're drawing their little cartoons, they're not just exaggerating, they're actually depicting a Filipino. All right, that's a Filipino. All right, that says here, Philippines. Filipinos, all right? They're not exaggerating, all right? Of course, they got a little racist, right? But they're actually depicting it as the indigenous people of that area. We have here another, says here, father and son of the Philippines. As you guys can see, from the Philippines. All right, indigenous people from there. They're not from Africa. You got to break the spell. This is a Hindu right here. As you guys can see, they don't also, when we look, we picture Hindus, we picture something else. This is a Cheru man, Aboriginal Hindu from the Palamau region of India. All right, as you guys can see, take a good look. And then we got an Indian coolie girl in 1897, Trinidad and Tobago, as you guys can see. All right, she's from India, but she's in South America. They were brought over there. Okay. And then we got from India, the Panijan region of India, We got her and her people, which says here is in the picture pre-Dravidian, before the Dravidians got to India. Her people were already there, anciently already. This is a Fijian from the Fiji Islands. This is a family from Papua New Guinea. It's of bad quality. It was very small, but I found it, I colorized it, made it a little bigger, and this is what you get, Papua New Guinea. It says here, 1930s photo of a Naga warrior, Philippines. And they actually do mean Naga. There is a place, Naga, in the Philippines. All right, this is an actual indigenous person from that area. I was able to find this and colorize it, and this is what we got. These are Sinhalese, not Senegalese, Sinhalese women. All right, Sinhalese women, again, remember, Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent is where they was bringing these so-called Asians from, not from China. We're just getting started. This is another Sinhalese man. All right, another Sinhalese man. These are Asians. As you can see, his beard. Okay, here we go. We got Sinhalese so-called devil dancers. It says here, that's, according to, foreigners labeling them that. All right. So Sinhalese so-called devil dancers, as you can see. All right. Again, none of these people trace back to Africa. You got to break that out of Africa, spell. This is a Sinhalese woman as well. This is, again, a Sinhalese woman. All right. Right, what we're looking at right now, these are Sentinelese men. Just Google Sentinelese, you'll see where they're located. Southeast Asia. Again, these people do not trace back. They don't trace back to Africa. You got to break that spell. I know it's hard, but these people do not trace back to Africa. All right, if you just got here, a lot of people's been requesting me to read this book for all these years, right? Curimeo, please read this. Asian slaves in colonial Mexico. They turned Chinese people into Indians. They were labeling Chinese. Well, that was not so accurate. They just termed these people Chinos. All right, let's go back to the introduction again real quick. And I just want to read again. During the late 16th and 17th centuries, countless slaves from culturally diverse communities in the Indian subcontinent. Again, from what? From culturally diverse, very diverse. They didn't all look the same. Diverse communities in the Indian subcontinent in Southeast Asia journeyed to Mexico on the ships of the Manila galleon. On arrival in Mexico, slave owners and Spanish officials grouped them together, overlooked social and linguistic differences, and categorized them all as Chinos, right? These people ain't Chinese though. So you thought Chinos meant Chinese, right? It doesn't. It didn't back in 1600s Mexico or 1500s. It didn't. It says here 1940 Fiji warriors and a victim. They carrying a victim supposedly. Look at that. That's crazy picture if that's real. Really crazy. Right, as you can see what these people look like. All right, Fijians. It says Moluccas or Moluccas from the Maluku Islands. I showed you guys earlier what that was, as you guys can see. All right, let me zoom in a little bit. Look at his hair, his woolly, his what they call in Mexico Chino type hair. All right, and very swarthy individuals. Says here 1946 Indian bride and groom wearing ornate headdresses posing together on their wedding day. Okay, you see a Hindu couple. I can't see her, but you can see him. All right, look at that. Look at his headdress. Nice. Says here portrait of a groupman of Loloda Bay. Okay, again, this is all in the Indonesian Java area. Javanese, Indonesian, Papua New Guinea, South Pacific Island, Loloda Bay. Says here a bride shown her wedding adornment. Tanimbar, Maluku, Indonesia. You see, Indonesia. All right. Showing her wedding adornment. Right here it says a Notch girl, Madras, India. All right, a Hindu girl, you see? All right. Now, you know, I've seen this phenotype, this look in the Americas, North America. And when we're talking about those videos of the Maya and the Nagas and all that, just, just picture all that. So you see, so you're going to see familiar faces a lot of the time here. And that's what I'm trying to point out. They never show us these type of Asians. And when they're talking about they're bringing so-called Chinos, remember, it just told us all these different people with social and linguistic differences. They grouped them together and called them all Chinos. This is a royal person from Indonesia, it says here. All right. Royal person from Indonesia. And of course, Swarti as well. Swarti individual. This is a Sholaga man, 1909, from India, a Hindu. All right. From India. You see that? Very Swarti, coarse, curly, coarse hair. His people would be labeled Chinos in the 1600s, 1500s, going into Mexico. This is a portrait of another Sinhalese girl. It says wearing ornaments in the 1880s. Look at that. All right. These are Polynesians. All right. Indigenous Polynesians. Look how they look. They don't look the same, right? But they're the same people. They're in the same tribe. But remember what we saw earlier with the Dinka and the Khoisan. Those are Africans, right? They look more Asian than this Polynesian girl who's not African. Tell me that's not true. All right. We have some people from Papua New Guinea, some men here from Papua New Guinea. And we've seen a lot of phenotypes from Papua New Guinea. One of the major phenotypes that is common that we kind of see is that LeBron James look. These are Fiji. They call them cannibals. So these were people who they had brought to the U.S. This Barnum Circus, Barnum and Bailey had them parading them around in his circus. And they're from the Fiji Islands. And as you can see, right, in their coarse hair, here's your Chinos. Here's your Chinos, they turn into Indians. Right here we have a Fijian with a native comb, as it says here. He got a comb, he got to pick out his afro. He got to pick an afro pick, right? Again, the book told us they were bringing Southeast Asians and Indian subcontinent people over to Mexico. Now, we know a lot of those people also end up in the Caribbean as indentured servants, So again, we had two middle passages, all right? One was mainly coming from Europe, and the other one was mainly coming from Southeast Asia, not from Africa, guys. You guys got to break that spell. You got to do the research. This is real history. All right, you can actually trace the ships and everything these people came on, just like the Black Europeans and the white Europeans that came as indentured servants. And now we have, I believe, some more Fijians. I'm fortunate to get the answer, but these are Asians, Southeast Asians. Again, none of these people trace back to Africa. Break the spell. None of these people trace back. The haplogroups are Asian in origin. They're not from Africa. Do the research. These are some more Fijians. Just wanted to show you guys. Look at their afros. The Fijians had a lot of, they rocked the afros a lot, the Fijians. All right, as you can see, look at that. Look at that, perfect. It's all nice and round. He keep it nice and round, all right? You think afros started in the United States? No, it didn't. I'm serious, it didn't. And Fijian, I know a lot of people know this image. And again, none of these people trace back to Africa. Break the spell. These people actually grow a lot of hair and beard. They actually grow a lot of hair. They do grow hair. Again, that book told us they were bringing slaves from Southeast Asia. Fiji Islands is in Southeast Asia. And the book is going to tell you a lot of these people were being labeled Indian. Now, if they didn't get labeled Indian, what do you think they got labeled as? So-called Negros. grouped in as Negros, right? They get grouped in with Black Europeans. They get grouped in with the so-called Black Indians. And then everybody forgets who's who after all the mixture. This is an indentured servant coolie girl in the Caribbean. She's in the Caribbean. She's Hindu. This is a Hindu, right? This is a Hindu. And she's in the Caribbean. Asian slaves in colonial Mexico, from Chinos to Indians, from Tatiana Cejas. Now that we just went over all those images, we're going to understand now when she's talking about these so-called Chinos. She's going to explain the areas and the regions they were taking these so-called Chinos from, that they were bringing to Mexico. Again, Asian slaves in colonial Mexico, from Chinos to Indians, Miami University, Cambridge University Press. It says here in the introduction, during the late 16th and 17th centuries, countless slaves from culturally diverse communities in the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia journeyed to Mexico on the ships of the Manila galleon. Again, during the late 16th and 17th centuries. Again, I got to go over this step by step. A lot of people get confused. Even in part one, they're still resistant, not understanding what I'm saying. So let's learn what time period exactly when they're saying 16th and 17th centuries. What does that mean? It says here 16th century, right? The 16th century begins when? 1500s. 1500s. We're talking about the 1500s when they're talking about 16th century, not 1800s. Okay? Not recent. We're talking about 1500s. Who was the Spanish and the Portuguese in the 1500s? Remember from the past videos. So then we go to 17th century, and that starts when? 1601. So that's the 1600s. All right, let's go back to the book. Again, during the late 16th century, so that's the late 1500s, and the 17th centuries, right? The 1600s. So all this is before the 1700s. This is still in the 1600s and 1500s, right? What happened during that time? Countless slaves from culturally diverse communities in the Indian subcontinent in Southeast Asia, all right, not Africa, journeyed to Mexico on the ships of the Manila galleon. On arrival in Mexico, slave owners and Spanish officials grouped them together. They grouped all these people together from all these islands, all these different tribes, all these nations I just showed you from Southeast Asia. I'm going to show you a lot more, guys, of these different peoples that they grouped together, overlooked their social and linguistic differences, all right, and categorized them all as Chinos. They got categorized as Chinos. Chinos. All right, we're going to keep going back and forth just to get a clear perspective of what we're talking about. Remember, I have images from the 1800s when cameras was invented, 1900s, right? 1800s, 1900s. So imagine 1500, 1600, this is 400 years, 300 years before that. You know it's going to just get swarthier. The further back you go, you already know that. So imagine if I'm showing you people like this in the 1800s, imagine the 1500s. Remember they said from the Indian subcontinent, Hindus, they were taking them. This is a coolie girl in Martinique. This is a coolie girl in Martinique from India. Right here we have a Southern Indian man. This is from a Hindu from India, Southern India, an ancient Naga descendant. All right, take a good look. This is an Indian Hindu. This is a Hindu. All right, so that picture and many other pictures of the Southern Hindu tribes can be found in this volume series, Castes and Tribes of Southern India. There's actually many volumes of this. This is in volume 3, just for example. We're going to go into it real quick, and you guys can see right there we have, all right, remember this is from India, Southern India, Kadir, it says here. And here goes the picture I was just showing you guys. All right, let me just show you guys. He's from Kadir. Kadir. Now, in the same book, let me just read a little bit of the Kadirs. And we're learning about these people. It says the Kadirs or Kadans, Adans, Kadir or Adans, Kadans or Dans, inhabit the Anai Malai or Elephant Hills and the great mountain range which extends thence southward into Travancore. All right, so this Hindu man I was just showing you guys in color. All right, as you guys can see in the book, he's a Kadir, a tribal person. Kadir, he is from the Kadir tribe. You guys never heard of them, right? This is a Hindu from the Kadir tribe, and he would have been called a Chino when he was brought to Mexico, 1600s, 1700s. Chino, a Hindu, he got the Chino hair from the Kadir tribe. All right, so here he is in color again. You guys can see. That's where I got the image. You guys can see I'm not just making this up. This is not an African. This is a Hindu, and he's not from Africa. He's not African. And right here we have a man, a Hindu, as it says there, from the Shahabad region of India. Shahabad, all right? Ahir, from the Ahir tribe. We got the Alifuru people, the Alifuru. They try to say these people are African just because of their very swarthy complexion. Again, from the Maluku Islands of Indonesia. Indonesia, all right? Remember I showed you where the Maluku Islands was? Right here, when I started showing you another statue here. As you guys can see, just, use your eyes. For me, it's self-explanatory, just looking at it. And these are the Alfuru people again. Most likely Alune people in the mountains of Seram Island, Seram. All these little island and regions in the South Pacific Indonesian archipelago, as they call it. As you guys can see, these are the indigenous people there. And these are the people, again, these Sephardic, merchant, Moorish, Jewish pirates, right? Swarthy pirates. These are the ones, they were, again, putting under forced labor, sent into Mexico, calling them Chinos. Right here, we got Ambonese people from Ambon. Remember I showed you Ambon Island? Ambonese people, Maluku Island, Southeast Asia. All right, as you guys can see. And that's why when they were showing all these so-called Filipino people, I remember a lot of these people were taken to the Manila slave market first before being brought to Mexico or the Spanish colonies over there. And so a lot of them got labeled as Filipinos too, but they were from different regions. And all these people got grouped together once they were in Mexico, and they were all labeled Chinos, as we just read. Chinos, right? These are Asians, original Asians. Right here I found the old picture in front of Angkor Wat, the temple, right? And I saw the people riding on the elephants, and they were very, very swarthy, as you guys can see. All right, look at that. The ancient people of Angkor Wat still repping, riding the elephants. Some ancient Nagas still there. Right here we have a Bagobo Cotabato Mindao Philippine man. All right, they call him a Moro from the Philippines, a Moor from the Philippines. That's what they call him. And right here we have a Southern India man, a Southern India man. India, right? India, subcontinent India. It just told us they were grabbing the Spanish in the 16th and 17th century. That's the 1500s and 1600s. They were grabbing people like him, bringing them to Mexico and calling them Chinos. So again, we come back to the book, and it's telling us on arrival in Mexico, slave owners and Spanish officials grouped them together, all these different people, overlooked their social linguistic differences, and categorized them all as Chinos. In time, Chinos came to be treated under the law as Indians. All right, listen, the term for all native people of Spain's colonies. That's what they were calling even the indigenous people of Southeast Asia. They were just calling them Indians too, and then The indigenous people of America, they were calling them Indians too, started grouping all these people together and became indigenous vassals of the Spanish crown after 1672, all right? Talking about 1600s. The implications of this legal change were enormous. As Indians rather than Chinos, they could no longer be held as slaves. This book tracks Chinos' complex journey from the slave market in Manila, all right, Manila, slave market in Manila, Philippines, Manila, not West Africa, Manila, to the streets of Mexico City, and from bondage to liberty. The story of Chino slaves transpired during the 17th century in the expansive context of the Spanish Empire. Their experience points to the interconnectedness of Spain's colonies and the reach of the crown, which brought people together from Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe in a historically unprecedented way. All right, so I just want to tell people, you know, got to dodge the hijack. And some of these writings here, the author still goes up with the out of Africa theories, prescribes to it. This is an older book. It says the book examines Chino's story in this broad framework, emphasizing that the history of coarse labor is necessarily connected to colonial expansion and forced global migration. By placing Chinos in this larger narrative, the study challenges some assumptions about the uniformity of slave experience in the Americas, especially in Mexico. The Spanish crown dictated the legal status of people living in the colonies, but the sprawling empire also allowed for contingency and individual agency. Chinos employed myriad strategies to gain some modicum of personal freedom. This is another Hindu woman, all right? So a whole different, like, kind of like phenotype. To me, honestly, she looks like many Americans I've seen. I know, I've seen in pictures, movies, TV. So who's to say, you know, who's who based on only on appearances? Another Hindu woman, just want to show you guys. Indentured servants in the Caribbean. All right, so I don't know if she's making tea for herself or if she's a servant, but this is an indentured servant where I found the image. We got a Hindu girl, all right, and this is in India. This is an image from India. I colorized, very old picture, really from the 1860s or 70s, I think it said. And yeah, this is a Hindu girl, as you can see. Let me just close up a little bit more. Remember the book, all right? Remember the book. We have some Fijian women, some beautiful Fijian women in the traditional clothing in front of their huts, all right? Or chief, as you can see, all right? This is an East Indian woman in Suriname, all right? She was an indentured servant, ended up in Suriname, right? South America. She ended up in South America in Suriname, all right? Suriname. She's a Hindu. This is a Hindu. Right here we have a photo of a Taiwanese member of the indigenous community, all right? This is from Taiwan. Again, these are old pictures I colorized. This is a Taiwanese or Taiwan indigenous man wearing what is thought to be a Formosan clouded leopard pelt. Was taken by Japanese anthropologist Tori Rizzo circa 1900, University of Tokyo. All right, again, a man from Taiwan, Swarti. This is a Southern Indian man. I got this from that book I showed you guys earlier, The Caste and Tribes of Southern India. All right. And it was in black and white. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, wow, I have to colorize this. And just look at him, man. Just look at that hair. And look at his phenotype. Look at his complexion. This is a Hindu. Your so-called Chino they were bringing to Mexico. So dodge that hijack. What a great picture, right, guys? Look at him. Just look at that. Wow. Here we have Bagobo Group, Cotabato, Mindanao, Philippines. All right, Filipinos, very swarthy Filipinos. A lot of them with the woolly hair. We got another Bagobo warrior from Mindanao, Philippines. all right, from the Philippines. As you guys can see, his woolly, curly hair, all right, very swarthy complexion, Filipino. Right here, we're in Bali for a Balinese festival. A Balinese festival, these are Bali indigenous people from Bali. As you can see how they look, all right, a Balinese festival. This is an old picture. Right here, we have a Batak family, circa 1870. Batak. Real quick, Batak people, Filipinos, right? The Batak are one of about 140 indigenous peoples, 140 in just in the Philippines alone. They are located in the northeastern portions of Palawan, a relatively large island in the southwest archipelago. Since ancient times, the Batak have inhabited a series of river valleys along the coastlines of what is today Puerto Princesa City. All right, since ancient times, the Batak people of the Philippines, this is them right here, as you guys can see. All right, here they are right here. Exact same picture in Wikipedia. These are the Batak people of the Philippines. Again, these are not Africans. They've been there since ancient times, since the beginning. All right, it's conjecture to say they are from Africa just because they look like this. It says Batak woman in Sumatra, but she's in Sumatra. All right, so she maybe was taken there. It says resting on a notch log, which serves as a ladder to her house. Okay, a Batak woman. All right, you see what she looks like, right? Again, Asians, so-called black Asians. Right here we have a picture of some boys from North Sumatra, all right? Southeast Asia, North Sumatra, the Sumatra Island, right? North Sumatra. Do you see? What do you see here? Swarthy little boys, so-called Negros, right? So we go back to the book, Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico from Chinos to Indians. I'm gonna read here from chapter 1 real quick, little bit. It says, Katarina de San Juan, China slave and popular saint. She became a saint. She was a China slave though. China, remember who they were calling Chinos now. Now you got a clear perspective. It says around the year 1610, a young girl was seized from her homeland in South Asia and taken to the city of Puebla, Mexico. So in 1600, right? 1600, she's from South Asia. These are swarthy people, where she became a popular saint named Katarina de San Juan. She was unique in that churchmen crusaded to canonize her as an exemplary Christian after her death, but her life trajectory closely approximated that of other Chino slaves who made the journey from Asia to Mexico in the 17th century. Again, that's the 1600s. With them, Katarina witnessed the same legal and social changes that turned all Chinos into Indians. Katarina's experience makes concretely visible the human toll of the trans-Pacific slave trade, at the same time illustrating how individuals took part in the transformation of slavery. Katarina's story is now Mexican folklore. The known outline of Katarina's life is that Portuguese slavers took her from the western coast of India. All right, she's Hindu. Katarina's Hindu. We saw the Hindus, what they look like. We saw some of the coolie girls, right? She's a Hindu. And who took her? Portuguese slavers, these merchants, Sephardic Moorish people. They took her from the west coast of India on a trading voyage that went around the subcontinent across the Bay of Bengal, through the Straits of Malacca, Malacu, the Malacca Islands, right? And up South China Sea to Manila in the Philippines. That's the slave market where they finally sold her at the market. This was the first leg of a forced journey that continued on the ship of the Manila galleon, which carried Katarina across the Pacific to the port of Acapulco in Mexico, right? Acapulco in 1619. Look at that year. Same year they were bringing the what? The 20 odd, so-called odd Negroes to Virginia. Remember? Virginia. They were grabbing them from the exact opposite side, Veracruz, Mexico. So who knows if that was some Chinos they were actually grabbing too. Some Chinos they had grabbed from, across the country, because Mexico wasn't the final stop for a lot of these so-called Chinos. You guys got to understand, from there, they would be sent to other colonies, the Caribbean, South America, possibly even North America. The seas and oceans behind her, Katarina was then made to walk along a difficult terrain called the China Road, Via de China, to Mexico City, and then on to Puebla, where she lived for the remainder of her life. Katarina's survival and success were closely tied to her ability to garner support from various patrons. Her first were a Portuguese merchant. Like I said, merchant, there you go, Portuguese merchants. Who's the merchants? You guys already know if you've been following me. And his wife, who purchased Katarina. These are so-called Negro people too. These Portuguese merchants and his wife, and who purchased Katarina to be their domestic servant. In this position, Katarina had some freedom to run errands and wander the streets of the growing city. So she was witnessed the construction of the city's famous cathedral that was consecrated in 1649. Encouraged by her masters, Katarina also attended Mass in her daily outings, finding a spiritual home in the temple of the Jesuit College in Puebla. The Jesuit College. When her masters died, having granted her liberty and their wills, all right, so she was freed, Katarina was left free but penniless, which forced her to work as a domestic servant of a neighborhood priest. Soon after, Katarina sought to take personal vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience as lay religious woman, Beata, but the said priest dissuaded her from this pursuit and instead pressed her into marriage. As a result, Katarina had to wait until she was widowed to lead the religious life she so desired. When Katarina died in 1688, she was a beloved, popular saint, grieved by the residents of Puebla, where she is still remembered today. They even have a statue of her. They show it in this book. All right, so she became a saint, but this China, right, Hindu, right, Swarti Hindu, this Hindu woman. This is another coolie woman from the West Indies, in the West Indies, I mean. As you can see, very beautiful, nice jewelry. Look at her nose ring. A lot of history and tradition, you know. Things that they never teach us. They don't show us these people. They never showed me this stuff in elementary school or anywhere in school. They just told us. We read a little bit about that part of history. I kind of remember, you know, indentured servitude, the Indians, they brought them over in the 18, no, you know, there's a deeper history before the 1800s. The Spaniards, the Moors, yeah, the Sephardic Jews and the Moors and the pirates, those pirates, they were going over there, the Portuguese and the Spaniards, who were Moors, they were going over there, enslaving these people like her, bringing them over here to America. And as the book we just read said, a lot of them were eventually in Mexico, a lot of them were being classified as Indians, all right? Or a lot of them chose to be classified or pushed to be called Indian so they can get out of their slavery status. This is another East Indian woman. She's from Martinique, all right? She ended up in Martinique. So they ended up all over the Caribbean, a lot of them. This is a coolie woman from Trinidad. Look at her. We got another coolie woman from Trinidad. Again, these are Hindus, Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asian slaves, descendants that they were bringing. You know, these are the same ones they were bringing even in the 1600s. All right, and right here we have Cambodian princesses, all right? Cambodian princesses, all right? Let me just show you, zoom in. And as you guys can see, very swarty, very swarty. So zoom out again, you guys can see the whole gear. All right, princesses from Cambodia. It says here, this is the celebrated Dato Mandi, upon whom honors were conferred by the Queen Regent of Spain. This is in the Philippines, all right? Dato Mandi from the Philippines. This is a chief of the Savai, one of the Samoan islands. The Savai Island, all right? Samoan, original Samoans, Novel Caledonia. So this is from New Caledonia. Again, Southeast Asians. Southeast Asians. That's where the book said they were bringing the slaves from. This is what a Southeast Asian looked like, especially, listen, especially 1500s, 1600s, all right? This is a picture from the 1800s, so imagine. All right, so real quick, we're gonna just show a picture from Ceylon. Where is Ceylon? Ceylon is right here in Sri Lanka, all right? Sri Lanka. We're gonna see a lot of the Ceylon people too today, original people of Sri Lanka, as you guys can see where it is, right under India, all right? All right, so these are Ceylonese girls from Sri Lanka, all right? From Sri Lanka, as you guys can see. Again, these are not Africans. I know it's hard for a lot of you to let go of that, and you guys take this so personal every time I say this. And if you're new again to my channel, this is the first video you're watching, or you're new to the channel, you've only been here a couple videos, we've already debunked the out of Africa theories. Those are theories. Everything and everyone did not come out of Africa. You guys gotta really get that in your head, all right? Melanated people all over the earth, all over the world. Take a good look. These are the Ceylonese indigenous women, all right? Again, remember, these pictures are from the 1800s, so imagine what they look like in the 1500s and 1600s when Spain and Portuguese merchants, pirates, Sephardic, Jewish, Moorish pirates were taking these people to the Americas. These are children from Papua New Guinea, all right? There's a type, and there's other different types we're going to see in Papua New Guinea, but these are children from Papua New Guinea. Look at this one. Cutie, he's smiling. He's having a fun day with the picture, at least. I don't look like the rest of them are. They got forced. He's looking at somebody else, so they're trying to distract him, make him smile. He probably didn't want to be there either. But look at these beautiful children with their tribal gear. Right here we have some more children. This time it's in Bali again. We're in Bali, Balinese children in an ancient temple here from their ancestors, chilling in front of the temple of their ancestors right here. Some Balinese, Bali children. Now it says here, interesting part, says Ramos' definition of the term Chino reflects a unique understanding of the trans-Pacific slave trade and the origins of some of these people, all right, the origins. He wrote in these parts, natives of India are called Chinos, all right? Hindus were being called Chinos, like I was telling you. They all come from the Orient by way of the Philippines, brought by the Portuguese, all right? The Portuguese, who's these Portuguese? Portuguese Jews, all right? This explanation strongly implies that most Chinos were slaves taken by Portuguese traders from South and Southeast Asia to the Spanish colony in the Philippine Islands, where they then boarded the Manila galleon bound for Mexico. Ramos knew about the workings of the trade from Katarina, who spoke to him at length about her experience. She testified that Portuguese slavers worked in the Indian Ocean world, and that the mechanisms of the Portuguese trading system reached the Spanish Philippines. These details about the trafficking networks which crisscrossed the Indian Ocean to the China Sea and Pacific Ocean were generally unknown to other people in Mexico. With this account, Ramos sought to clarify some of the contemporary confusion regarding the origin of Chinos, who were generally thought of as people born on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. The term Chino generally referred to individuals who traveled on the Nao de China, another name for the Manila galleon. That's what they were called, Chinos, because they came on the Nao de China. That was the name of the boat, the Manila galleon. They were people from the Orient who came to stay or simply passed through. Like I said, not all of them stayed in Mexico. They were just passing through. From there, they brought them to other colonies. All right, these Chinos, these so-called swarthy Asians, so-called Negros, swarthy Asians, they brought them to other colonies. Ramos does describe an important distinction. There were Chinos who were slaves, and there were also Chinos, generally natives of the Philippines, who were free immigrants, itinerant traders or sailors. All Chinos traveled to Mexico on the same ships of the Manila galleon. The slaves, like Katarina, generally stayed, whereas free Chinos had more mobility. The presence in Mexico of free immigrants from the Philippines added further complexity to questions regarding where Chinos came from and who they were. Ramos makes several comments about countrymen from the Philippines who lived in Puebla. According to Spanish law, these native people were indigenous vassals. According to Spanish law, what? They became what? Indigenous vassals, just like the natives of Mexico. They were Indians who owed tribute to the crown in exchange for certain rights and protections. In Mexico, the natives of the Philippines were called Filipinos, Indian Chinos, referring to their legal status as indigenous vassals, as well as simply Chinos. This confusing nomenclature caused some problems in Mexico, as free natives of the Philippines were sometimes confused with Chino slaves and treated as such. Didn't matter. For the most part, however, their presence in Mexico encouraged officials to conceive of all Chinos as free Indians. Kind of what they look like originally, the pictures, before I colorized them. It says here, Guyana indentured servant, from whence they left, paying homage to the indentured servants of 1834-1920. So remember, the book that people wanted me to read is actually talking about Hindu people and Asians, right, from the 1500s to the 1600s, so way before the 1800s. And I'm talking about this book right here that we're going to read in another video. But before we read this book, I wanted to break some prejudices. Again, I know I'm being repetitive, but there's a reason as to why I want to show you these pictures and these people first, so we can picture when we're reading that book who they were talking about. All right, who were they talking about? And this is a Fiji man. Again, they rock the froze. The Fiji tribal man. Look, West Indian coolies, Jamaica. West Indian coolies. So how do you know you don't have coolie or Hindu in you? You don't think none of these people ever mixed with other people? I'm sure they eventually did. The motto of Jamaica, out of many, one people, right? It wasn't just Indians, wasn't just Black Europeans, it wasn't, or just Mongols, as you want to call them, but Hindus and Southeast Asians as they were bringing over there since colonial times, not just from the 1800s. They want you to believe it was only from the 1800s. So remember, Katarina, we just read earlier, Katarina, the girl who was taken as a baby, she was Hindu. All right, she was Hindu. This is another Hindu girl, a coolie girl in Georgetown. Demerara, Georgetown, is that Guyana? Georgetown? Yep, Georgetown, South America. Another coolie, a Hindu. All right, as you guys can see, with her traditional clothing on and her jewelry and everything. They love to wear jewelry, on their nose and everything. They're always rocking it. Some more coolie women in Trinidad. All right, they're in Trinidad, again, Hindus that were brought over as indentured servants. Right here we have a Cotabato man, again, from the Philippines, Mindanao, Philippines. All right, he is referred to as a Moro from the Philippines, or a Moor from the Philippines. Literally, like when I was looking for these pictures, that's what they were classifying these people as, Moros from the Philippines. Moors from the Philippines. Right here we have a Dayak warrior. This is a postcard, British North Borneo. All right, Borneo, the island of Borneo. Okay, the island of Borneo. All right, so it's going to bring us over to Borneo right now. Where is Borneo? Not too far, is right here. This big island, it's a pretty big island. You see all the towns and everything. Can you imagine all the tribal people just in this island alone? So again, we have a young man here, a Dayak warrior from the Dayak tribe in Borneo. Also emphasize his hat, looking like a turban, looking much like what the Seminoles and a lot of the southeastern North American tribes wore. All right, you guys know what I'm talking about. Show you many Seminoles with this type of hat. Look at the feathers, and look at the feather. Is there an ancient connection to the Americas? And I would say, no doubt about it, who are the ancient Nagas? The Devadasi Indian women. The Devadasi, this is a very old and small picture. that I found, but you can see what she looks like. All right. And right here it says, this young girl in this photograph taken by French photographer René Tetard. The photo was taken in Lao Cai, an old town located in the Tonkin region of mountainous northern Vietnam. Vietnam. This is an indigenous woman from Vietnam. Take a good look at her. All right? Vietnamese. This is Katarina's hagiographers express an ambiguity about her birthplace that reflect the diverse origins of Chino slaves. Katarina could not remember her origins because slavers stole her away when she was just a little girl, dragging her through distant provinces and confusing her sense of place. One possibility is that she was from Surat, as Portuguese traders controlled that port before 1615, which was when she was kidnapped. According to Ramos' account, she was a poor girl from China, Mogor, or India, picked from among the thorny bushes and hidden jungles of Cambaya and Bengal. All right, they're talking about India. From the perspective of people living in Mexico, King China and Mungal India were apparently indistinguishable as faraway places where Chinos came from. So to Mexicans, it was all the same, from China to India to Vietnam to, it was like all, to them it was all Chinos. Philippines, Papua New Guineas, to them they were all just Chinos. Katarina's testament from 1686 recorded a similar conflation of geographic areas. It reads, Katarina de San Juan, natives of the Mungal Kingdom in the Philippines Islands. Katarina dictated the will, so the notary was the likely author of this geographic reference rather than something she actually thought. Either way, it reflects the contemporary tendency to combine unknown regions. It says here, Indian slaves, indentured laborers for British profit. Again, when they're saying Indian, they don't mean American Indian. They're talking about Hindu. All right. It says here, Trinidad and Tobago experienced an influx of tens of thousands of Indians during the 19th century. Some Indians came directly from India. Many are descendants of indentured laborers. All right. Many are descendants of indentured laborers. All right, look at that. It says East Indian immigration, Guyana. All right, East Indian indentured immigrants in Guyana. As you go. Again, these are the so-called Chinos. They were labeling Indian in Mexico. Yeah, soak it all in. Empty your cup, break the spell. It says here, Indian slaves, indentured laborers for British profit. And again, Trinidad and Tobago influx of tens of thousands of Indians, right? Hindus, tens of thousands of Hindus. Some more coolies, some more coolies in the West Indies. All right. You see, so-called black people, so-called Negro. All right, and I thought this was cool. Some images of Buddha's statues and everything, or in other. As you can see, it's all over the place. Who's the original Asians? When we're talking about bringing Chinos over here in the 1500s and 1600s. Remember, the book told us they were coming from the Indian subcontinent. From the Indian subcontinent. Look at these murals right here. Oh, look at this statue. They try to wipe off. Look at that. They try to scrape off the complexion. Look at this as well. Wow, look at that. Almost look like the Ethiopian and Russian icons, right? And then you got the Buddha. Some more images right here. As you can see. And as you can see, it's all over the place. They know who the original people are. They make the pottery and the ceramic statues themselves. They know why they depict this guy so dark skinned. Here goes, I don't know if that's Buddha or another Indian subcontinent mural, so-called black person. All right, another one right here. And as you can see, If you can see the diversity, look at the diversity. Look at his complexion. He's a little greener. He's a little greener. I don't know if that's just from fading, but as you can see, he's lighter. There's light-skinned people out here, and there's dark-skinned people together. Look at this. Isn't this cool? Wow. Tibetan Buddha with conical hat. There's some more murals right here, as you can see. So-called black people with different shades, so-called Negros, different shades. These are the things they'll never show you in school. It says, these are Polynesians. It says, why do Polynesians look so different today? Hey, I didn't write that, all right? Why do Polynesians look so different today? These are Polynesians. These people look more so-called African than the actual Khoisan, who are one of the oldest Africans. Just something for you to think about. And these people do not trace back to Africa. The difficulty of identifying Katarina's birthplace points to a broader methodological problem for the study of Chino slaves. Slave deeds only rarely specify the individual's origin. One example is a slave named Antonio de Silva, who was identified as a Creole from Goa. Instead, most slave deeds simply stated where the slave was last purchased, usually in Manila, with no reference to the person's birthplace, all right? So a lot of these people, again, you guys paying attention, is that they were coming from these other islands, Papua New Guinea, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, the Maluku Islands, Borneo, Bali, India, because their last place of record was in Manila or the Philippines. That's where people jotted them down as being born in Manila or Filipinos, right? Our understanding of Chino slaves' varied origins is therefore obscured by the surviving documentation, which suggests that many of them were from Manila, which they weren't. The hagiographies about Katarina are all the more important than for what they tell us about people's different paths to the Manila slave market. The description of Katarina's capture exposes the Portuguese as having taken an active role in enslaving people, all right? These Portuguese Sephardic Moorish people, yes, they had an active role in this. When she was about 9 years old, some Portuguese men came upon her on the beach where she was playing with her other children. The men took them hostage and then sailed to a distant place where, assured that no one would take away their prey, leap on shore and disembark the stolen prisoners and goods. Based on her own experience, it is understandable that Katarina thought that all the Portuguese in Asia sailed the seas and lands in the condemnable pirating of goods and people. Right here we have a Dikshitar Brahman from India. Again, from southern India. Again, this pic is from that book I showed you guys earlier, Caste and Tribes of Southern India. This is a man from there, as you guys can see, so-called Negro. All right. Don't think I'm making this up and showing you Africans. Again, Dikshitar, right? Dikshitars or Tilai Vaz, Atanar, a Vedic Shaiva Brahmin servitor community of Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu. And look at that temple there in Tamil Nadu that was built by his ancient ancestors. That's who built that, who are based mainly in the town of Chidambaram. He's from Chidambaram. They are an exclusive group of Brahmins learned in the Vedas and Jagnas. This is a Brahmin sacrifices who also serve as the hereditary trustees of the Nataraja temple in Chidambara. All right, he is the hereditary. These are his people who build this temple. All right, who built this pyramid? Who taught them? Who's the Maya? Did they go over to India and become the Nagas? Who built this? They credit most of these temples to the Nagas. All right, you guys read all that history, right? That's his people who built that temple. His people, and they're the guardians of it today, probably still. But again, break the spells. This is a Hindu. When he would have been called a Chino, we read that earlier, he would have been called a Chino. He would have been grouped together. They would have all been grouped together, all these diverse cultures, as Chinos. Here we have some more Dayak warriors from Borneo. Remember we saw some earlier with the turban on and the feathers looking like the Seminole hats, remember? These are from Borneo, again, Dayak warriors. You guys can see Dayak warriors, Borneo. And right here we have an East Indian basket seller. She is in America, South America, I believe, or Trinidad, somewhere there. So again, this is a coolie, as she would be referred to, as you guys can see, so-called Negro woman or girl. All right, this is a Hindu making baskets and selling them for a living. Right here we have another East Indian family in America. I believe this is in Trinidad or Guyana or actually Suriname. I did find a lot of them from Suriname, one of those three places. And I just want you to look, how they look. And again, these are Hindu East Indians. They would be referred to as Chinos in the 1500s, 1600s. Look at her with her gear. Look at her man, I guess. Right, and then her. Here we have another East Indian woman. This is from Trinidad, all right, from Trinidad and Tobago. Take a good look at her. This was an old and very small picture, so I had to fix it up a little bit and make it bigger so it looks a little pixelated. But look at her earring coming to her nose. The picture's not too good. And right here we have some more East Indians or Hindus, aka coolies, and this is in Guyana, in South America. Guyana, South America. These are East Indians in Guyana. East Indians in Guyana. Again, these people would have been called Chinos back in the 1500s, 1600s when they were bringing them in from Manila. Right here we have a father and son from the Tanimbar region of the Maluku Islands in Indonesia. All right, father and son, and he got a turban on. We got some more Fijis here from 1881. The Viti Levu Highlands, the Fiji Islands, indigenous people from there, so-called Negro. And again, these are not from Africa. They don't descend from Africa just because they look like this. You guys gotta stop that and stop giving opinions and believing everything they told you in school without doing proper research or proper genealogy. Another Fiji Islander, as you guys can see. Sometimes they rock their hair like that too. But you can see a descendant of the ancient Fiji people right here. Right here we have another Fiji Island native. Again, these are old pics I colorized, so these are very old. Just look at how he's rocking his hair. Like I told you guys, that was part of their culture. That was part of their culture. Right here we have some Fiji Island women dressed up. Again, these are women from the Fiji Islands, all right? So-called Negro women. Some more Fiji Islanders, okay? Colorized. These are very old pictures, I was able to find. Look at his hair, how he's rocking it perfect. Look at him. He got it styled up like spikes and stuff, like nice. I told you this is part of their culture. Another Fiji man here. All right, let me zoom in with his staff or horn or instrument or weapon. I don't know, I haven't done the research. Look at his hair, how he styled it. Nice. And these are feathers, I believe, coming up. Some feathers. All right, rocking the feathers. What does that tell you? Where's the connection to Amaruka? Another Fiji man. It says here, Fiji warrior. They get creative on their own and make their own jewelry and everything. All right, look at his phenotype and his hair. Again, from Fiji Islands. These are the people they were grabbing from the Southeast Asia, Indian subcontinent, as we read earlier. And they were grouping together as Chinos, classifying them as Chinos, and eventually many as Indians. This is another Fiji woman. All right, take a good look. Again, these are colorized pictures we found, old pictures from archived websites. And this is a Fiji woman. We have some more Fijian men working as laborers. This is in 1884 in the Rua province. All right, laborers, Fijian men, laborers. Take a good look at them, how they look, right? Look at that. Ancient people of Fiji. And right here we have a Hindu girl, right? A girl from India, right? An Indian, a Hindu. Look at her. So swarthy. She looks like a lot of the North American women I grew up seeing in Boston and everything. What is the difference? What is the connection here with the ancient Nagas and the Mayas? What is the connection with the Amarukans and the Nagas? Here we got a girl in Ceylon, Ceylon, Sri Lanka. Remember Sri Lanka, that's under India, so that's why she may look a little Hindu. She might also be from India and being brought to Ceylon as a servant, but this is what Ceylon people look like too. All right, so real quick, we return now to the book Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, from Chinos to Indians. Okay, you guys starting to understand who they're really talking about? Remember, we're talking about the 1500s and 1600s, Southeast Asia, Maluku Islands, the Philippines, India, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, Papua New Guinea. We're going to read a little bit of chapter 2 real quick. All right, it says here, chapter 2, the diversity and reach of the Manila slave market. The story of the people who journeyed from the Philippines to Mexico begins in 1565. 1500s, guys, when Miguel Lopez de Legazpi finally realized Spain's long-standing ambition of establishing a colony in Asia. Geronimo Pacheco, originally from the Eastern Islands and a native of Bengal, all right, this guy, a native of Bengal, he's Hindu, accompanied Legazpi on his founding voyage. So this guy's kind of helping the Portuguese, right? Pacheco had been made to travel from Bengal to Portugal and across the Atlantic to Mexico, where he was assigned the task of following the religious and people going to the Occidental islands. They needed an interpreter who was native of those islands, you see? So he was with them, this guy. His journey with Legazpi was a harbinger of what came afterwards. The forced migration of enslaved people from Asia to America, who crossed the Pacific Ocean in the service of European masters. The foundation of the Spanish Philippines gave rise to the Trans-Pacific slave trade. Trans-Pacific, it's not transatlantic. I think it was actually more from this side, especially early on of 1500s, 1600s, guys, that they were actually bringing these so-called other Negros or so-called Indians. Remember, they were eventually becoming Indians. The slave trade began soon after Conquest and with considerable controversy. In 1570, Don Martin Enriquez de Almanza, the viceroy of New Spain, ordered the return of 15 slaves who had recently arrived from the Philippines. In his words, it was unwise for the natives of the Philippines to think that we consent to their ill treatment. Filipino Indians could potentially rebel against Spanish sovereignty if they realized that the colonists planned to sell them into slavery and ship them into Mexico. All right, there's footnotes here. There's a lot of sources for this. In addition, the viceroy feared that the few slaves who were Muslims or Moros, look at that, Moors, would dogmatize their sect among the Indians of Mexico and endanger the missionary project. The viceroy's efforts to discourage this commerce were in vain. Slaves purchased in Manila were sent to Mexico throughout the 17th century, 1600s, throughout the whole 1600 years, right? And then they were doing it in the 1500s too. So that's 200 years, right? And look at this. This book is going to tell you, and this is what I've been trying to show you guys this whole time, even on part 1, but I didn't really emphasize it. I want to show you guys that this book is literally telling you where these people were taken from. You guys got to pay attention, all right? It says birthplace mentioned in this book, the Ambon, Borneo, Java, Makassar, the Maluku Islands, Indonesia, Bengal as India, Ceylon, Sri Lanka, India, and some Japan. We did see some Ainu, right? The Macau, China, Malacca, Malay, Malaysians, Muslim Philippines, Jolo, Mindanao, Zamboanga, Spanish Philippines, Cagayan, Calamian, Camarin, Cavite. I showed you guys all these islands. All right, so we got Borneo right here, right? Maluku Islands. All right, here's Telek Ambon. The Ambon is the Maluku Islands, right? They just showed us Maluku, as you guys can see, Maluku Islands, right? This is where they were grabbing from. Sri Lanka, Ceylon, Borneo, Bali, Java down here, Java, Bali. All right, Sumba, Timor Island, Malaysia, right? Malaysia, Sumatra, Sri Lanka, and India, right? That's where they're grabbing these people from. They're not from up here. They're not all mostly Chinos or up here Koreans or anything like that, right? They were coming down here first, down here and grabbing people. These are all so-called Negro people, Negros. Get it in your head, Negros that they were bringing over to Mexico and the Americas and calling them Chinos. And eventually a lot of these people became classified as Indians or Indios over in America, becoming mixed and confused with the actual Indios or indigenous Indians of America. All right, so the book is clearly telling us where they're grabbing these people from. You guys got to pay attention to that. All right, these are all Negro people, black folks. And there's a map of what I just showed you. Borneo, Brunei, look at them, Philippines, Maluku Islands, Timor, Macau. These are just some of the regions they mentioned, but they were grabbing people from all over, even the white, where it says white regions here, all of that. I got pictures from all these places. Chino slave origins. Pay attention. Chino slave origins. These are not Chinos how we think Chinos. These are so-called Negros. Chino slave origins. To think that Asians look a certain way and that the word Chino is supposed to look a certain way, maybe in modern times, but not in the 1500s and 1600s, all right? Again, Chino slave origins. These places right here that was filled with so-called Negro people they were bringing to the Americas. These weren't Africans they were bringing, these slave trades. They were coming from Asia, actually. A whole history that wasn't told to us in our school systems. Shame on you, teachers, for teaching wrong history if you're still doing it. Say something. Speak up. Change the curriculums. Stop teaching lies to the children. And again, that figure of the map says Chino slave origins, map prepared by Eric Johnson, Numeric and Spatial Data Services Librarian, Miami University. They did the research. You guys gotta understand, this is real history. This is a Southeast Asian woman as well. All right. Might be from Sumatra, Sri Lanka, not sure. I wasn't able to get a location, but she was very, very swarthy, so-called China, right? So-called China. Here we have Southeast Asians from Papua New Guinea. Either doing some fishing or going to fish, coming back from fishing, you know, in a boat. Not sure what they're doing, the picture, but as you guys can see, all right, woolly-haired, swarthy complexions, so-called Negroes. Here we have a South Pacific Asian man, another one right here. Not sure the country, but yeah, I thought it was cool when I colorized it. I was like, yup, swarthy, so swarthy. Here we have South Pacific Asian women, some more. And these are some of the ones that I didn't know the regions, but we just knew they were from Asia. Again, they don't show us these type of people when we think of Asians. And to me, these are so-called Negro women. And these are your Chinas or Chinos. When they were enslaving them and bringing them to the Americas, that's what they were classifying them as. Here we have a South Pacific Asian man, another one. You guys can see, so swarthy. All right. I believe this is from the Philippines, if I remember correctly. Here we have a Tamil girl from India wearing an upper body tunic over a sari, 1912. All right. A Tamil girl from India. Take a good look at her. Tamil girl, a Hindu girl. Remember the story of Katarina? She was brought to Mexico. She was a Hindu. All right. What if she looked like her? Here we have another Tamil woman. All right. Tamil woman. Look at her jewelry, her headgear. Back up a little bit. She is definitely swarthy, what we say, copper colored. Tamil beauty, right? Tamil beauty, it says here, Tamil India. A Tanim Baris man with ivory imported from Sumatra, Maluku Islands, Indonesia. All right, he's an Indonesian from the Maluku Islands. Look how interesting he looks. Here we have the head of the Molo with his entourage visiting the post holder of Babao Timor. All right, Southeast Asians, all right, so swarthy, the head of the Molo, the Sultanate of Gorontalo, which was originally known as the Kingdom of Gorontalo, is one of the oldest and most influential kingdoms in the northern peninsula, Sulawesi Island, Indonesia. One of the oldest kingdoms. Who these people represent? One of the oldest kingdoms in Indonesia. Look at that, so swarthy. Indigenous people, one of the oldest kingdoms, as it says there. Continues, says this chapter is about the Manila slave market and the indigenous Filipinos Muslim war captives, and other people who were sold there. It is a starting point for understanding the origins and ancestry of Chino slaves who lived in Mexico. Manila was a slave society during the 17th century, right? 1600s. Slaves did the majority of the labor, and master-slave relations shaped the general social order. Within years after the Spanish conquest, the bustling port city had some 40,000 residents of diverse origins. A full quarter of this population was enslaved. They were craftspeople, manual laborers, and servants who upheld their masters' social stature. By the 1620s, the city had 8,000 indigenous slaves and 2,000 foreign slaves, in addition to an untold number of Muslim slaves. The whole of the city was a slave market, supplying labor to Spanish colonists and indigenous elites. Even their own people were enslaving them. Slave auctions were held in the plazas found within the city's walls. All right, they never showed us none of this. They never told us. They always wanted us to think this was happening in West Africa, when it really wasn't that much. It was really happening over here and in Europe. And masters also sold slaves through individual transactions. The unorganized nature of the market makes it nearly impossible to quantify the volume of sales, but it is clear that Manila was an emporium for slaves. Masters from throughout the Spanish Philippines knew to come to the capital to secure chattel property. Philippines, right? We saw so many Philippines and all the people that were being brought to the Philippines so far already in these pictures. All the same people they're talking about here. This is the same people that were bringing to the Philippines, Manila. All those pictures I just showed you guys, right? Don't get lost. These are the same people they're talking about. They were bringing to the Americas as so-called Chinos. See, it says here, girls dressed for the harvest or New Year's party in honor of the ghost. Headdress on forehead in the shape of the moon or horns. This is from Indonesia. All right, these are Indonesians. Check it out. All right, again, not Africans, and these are the people, as they were mentioned in the book, a lot of their people were being enslaved, okay, and brought to Mexico. Right here, we got some Golas, some low-caste Hindu tribe in Rajputana region of India. Now, very interesting name, Golas, huh? Golas, Gula, Golas, Gula, Gula, Gola. Could there be a connection with the Gula of America? Gola, Gula. Right here we have a group of Tiruraye women from the Cotabato, Mindanao region of the Philippines, 1901. And again, these people were being called Moros or Muslims, Moros, Moors. These people were being called Moors in this area. This is a really cool picture I found. It was very old, very small. I, made it bigger, colorized it, fixed the pixelation a little bit so it can look, so we can see what's going on in the picture. As you guys can see, it says here, headhunter from Papua New Guinea, Southeast Asia. Papua New Guinea headhunter, huh? Let's zoom in a little bit, right? This is what he looks like. Look at the feathered crown, right? And then look what he's carrying here. It looks like he has an actual head. An actual head. Look at that. A headhunter from Papua New Guinea. Could that be a real head? Most likely. Right here we have a Hindu elderly woman from India. All right, just look at her. Look like a lot of people's grandma to me. We got here Sakunath. That's her name, Sakunath. The British West Indies. She is in Suriname. I believe I got this picture from a coolie Hindu woman. All right, named Sakunath. Sakunath. It says here we have a Hindu man and a child in Suriname, South America. He's blind, a blind Hindu beggar, I believe it says when I translated it, and a child. Again, this is in Suriname. These are Hindus, Indian people from Hindustan living in Suriname. We got another Hindu woman right here. I'm glad I was able to find a lot of these pictures so you guys can see when they're talking about they're bringing Hindus or Indian or people from Manila. And again, I'm reminded of Katarina's story we read earlier, how she was taken from India and she became a saint in Puebla, Mexico. All right, she was referred to as China, but she was from India. And again, another Hindu young woman named Eunobia. Her name is Eunobia. She's in Suriname, South America, okay? I want you guys to be real about this. Now, if you look at her, now you put her in Arawak clothing, you wouldn't be able to know. You'd say, yeah, that's an Arawak. That's for sure an Arawak. But this is a Hindu. Now, is there a connection with the Arawak Carib people in her? Maybe, anciently. So my point is that we just got to leave things open, that it may not always be just American indigenous blood when we find people in South America that look like her. Another Hindu woman, as you guys can see here, very swarthy. All right, look at the gear. I believe this was one of the wives of an emperor. He had a couple of wives they were shown in the pics. This was one of them. And here we have a Igorot warrior, headhunter of the Philippine Cordilleras. Okay, Igorot warrior, the Igorot tribe, tribal people, headhunters of the Philippines. Here's a Filipino smoking up from his pipe, chilling with his turban on. Here's a picture I found that was either from South America or the Caribbean, can't remember, but these were immigrants from India as they're labeling them here. This is in America, they're calling them immigrants, as you guys can see. These are all swarthy people, very swarthy Hindus, all right, with their turbans on. All right, so immigrants from India that were forgotten. We got another Hindu or Indian girl spinning silk. Look, choosing her legs and her hands. This is a skill, this is an art. And look at her. I just want you guys to really look at what she looks like. And again, her people in the 1500s, 1600s were being taken, enslaved, and being brought to America and being labeled as Chinos and Indios. All right, and here we have an indigenous couple from New Caledonia Island in the South Pacific. New Caledonia. So again, New Caledonia, where is it again? Right near Fiji, under the Solomon Islands, on the east side of Australia, way over here, Caledonia, right? New Caledonians, that's what they look like, right? So-called Negro people. Again, same people that were grabbing in the 1500s, 1600s, these Sephardic, Moorish, Jewish pirates, right? These were black folks that were doing this. These Spanish and Portuguese merchants, they were enslaving these people and bringing them to the Americas, okay? And we're back in the book Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, from Chinos to Indians, Tatiana Sejas, all right? And it says here, the Portuguese slave trade in the Indian Ocean world. A remote political event in Europe explains the prominence of Portuguese slave traders. Who's these Portuguese? Let's not forget, these are so-called Negro people, so-called black Portuguese, a lot of them Sephardic, Jewish, Moorish, Muslim, pirates, crypto, new Christians, crypto Jews, crypto Muslims. Again, Portuguese slave traders in the Philippines and the corresponding presence of foreign slaves in the Manila market. In 1578, all the way back in the 1500s, guys, Portugal suffered a succession crisis when King Sebastian I died without an heir. Philip II of Spain took this opportunity to invade the country and seize the Portuguese crown. During the period of Iberian Union or Spanish captivity, 1580 to 1640, the Spanish king ruled two empires with separate governmental structures. The Treaty of Tomar, 1581, expressively prohibited trade between the colonies of Spain and Portugal, but commercial links were nonetheless established between the Estado de India and the Philippines. Portuguese traders claimed that as vassals of the Spanish king, it was just for them to trade and contract in Manila. Having previously engaged in raiding for slaves in various islands of the Philippines archipelago, the Portuguese were eager to change the nature of their visits and enter the market as lawful traders. During this period of some 60 years, the Portuguese arrived in Manila with the monsoon winds, bringing slaves from the Moluccas, again, from where? Moluccas and Malacca in India. Malacca, Maluku Islands, the Malacca people. I showed you, so swarthy, woolly haired, Afro, whatever you want to call it. They're not Africans, and these are the people that Sephardic, Moorish, Portuguese, Jews and Muslims were enslaving, raiding, and bringing to the Americas. They're telling you right here, Moluccas and Malacca. They're giving you specific places. Go look at the people that were there. I'm already showing you pictures from the 1800s. Imagine 300 years later. So imagine what they looked like in 1500s, 1600s, right? 300 years before. The organization of this trade, which resulted in the influx of slaves from regions far beyond the Philippines archipelago, accounts for the great diversity of the Manila slave market. All right, influx of slaves from regions far beyond the Philippines. I showed you all these islands, and they were grabbing these people, bringing them to the Philippine Manila slave market. All right, and continuing, we have here an indigenous man from Mindanao, Philippines. The Mindanao Moors, as they were calling them, the Mindanao Filipino Moors, as they were calling them, as you guys can see. This was a great picture I found. This was an Indonesian woman. You know, some part of Indonesia. Remember, Indonesia is big, a lot of islands and stuff. And when I saw this in black and white, I was like, she looks like she's Swarty. So I colorized it, and this is what we got. All right. Look at that. Wow. Another man from Indonesia. Archipelago, remember, there's a lot of islands. You're going to find different phenotypes and different looks throughout the Indonesian archipelago. I'm not sure what he has in his mouth, but you know, this is a picture I found in colorized Indonesian man. Okay. Javanese people here. It says Javanese prince with 2 servants. This is in Java between 1865 and 1870. Look at his servants. Again, they're all Javanese. And this is the master, I guess, as you guys can see him. So this is a Javanese dancer. All right, let me zoom in. I mean, just look at her phenotype and her swarty brown complexion. All right, look at her hair. And look at her gear and her attire. Very nice picture. Javanese. Here we have a Kanak warrior from 1910. This is in New Caledonia. Remember, we saw the island earlier? New Caledonian, an indigenous New Caledonian. All right. Asian. This is not an African or of African ancestry. Guerreros Kanakes, or Kanak warriors from New Caledonia Island in the South Pacific. All right, you guys can see. Let me zoom in some more. All right, these are the people, again, these Sephardic pirates, these Moorish merchants, Portuguese and Spanish pirates were enslaving. These are the people they were enslaving and bringing to the Americas, and again, calling Chinos. A lot of these so-called Chinos eventually became known as Indios or Indians in the Americas. Here we have a Kanyang man from the Kanyan tribe. He's a Hindu, a hill tribe of the Kanyan people in Assam, India. Assam, India. Look at his turban with the Tartar design. Here we have Kaya girls from Myanmar's island, from the Myanmar island, Southeast Asia. Very swarthy people, indigenous Myanmar people or women, as you guys can see. So where is Myanmar? All right, let's take a look here. All right, so it's going to bring us to Myanmar, which says Burma, Myanmar, and look where Myanmar is. All right, it's on top of Thailand, next to India, Bangladesh, and these are some indigenous women from Myanmar. As you guys can see, the Portuguese were driven to trade in Manila by a desire to gain access to the silver sent from Mexico as part of the government's subsidy, situado, for the colony, as well as from silver merchants who sent their agents to acquire Asian commodities. Silver was the monetary standard in most of Asia, but the Portuguese had no silver deposits of their own, so they had to procure it. Elsewhere in Manila, the Portuguese offered a variety of goods in exchange for silver, including munitions, equipment for shipping and other metalware, cotton textiles from India, and spices. Slaves, however, were their singular most profitable commodity. Slaves was where the money was at. Contemporaries took special notice of the ships that regularly left Goa for Manila, and condemn the many offenses to God that were committed on these slaving vessels. All right, all these slave narratives talking about Kunta Kinte. Alex Haley lied. He was talking about what was going on to the Asians and the Europeans they were bringing. Remember, let's not forget the other slaves too. All these unwanted, undesirable Europeans. Check out my previous videos. And now we see that in Asia, there was a large quantity of these people being brought to the Americas too. So there's two major places they were bringing foreign labor. Apart from the local indigenous Americans they were enslaving, right? We got that too first. We got to clear everything up. There was already people here. They didn't need to bring so many people. They already had people in here in the Americas. When they needed more people, though, they wanted to keep colonizing, though, they brought others from Europe and Asia, not Africa, not as much as they told us. So many offenses happened in these slaving vessels. In this sense, the influx of American silver escalated Portuguese slave trading in Manila, as it prompted Portuguese traders to increase the number of sails they brought up to the Spanish capital to exchange for silver. The Portuguese, moreover, increased their trading activities because Manila had a great demand for slaves. Korewa tribal group says Aboriginal from the Chota Nagpur area of India. All right, these are Hindus, all right, Indians, Hindus, all right, these people, they're not from Africa just because they're dark skinned. Hope you guys starting to understand this major point. You gotta break those misconceptions. This is a Javanese dancer with a bow and arrow. It says Mangkuna Garang and Kraton Surakarta. A Javanese dancer with a bow and arrow. All right, you guys can see. So Swarti, so-called Negro, Javanese, indigenous person. Here we have a Mina woman from the Mina people, the Mina tribe in India, a Hindu. She is very dark complexion, looking like the Black Marys, right? Like the Black Mary statues in all these churches, Catholic churches all throughout Latin America and many other countries as well. They're showing the Black Madonna, looking like the Black Madonna. But this is a Mina woman from India, Hindu, a Hindu, and these are the people they were bringing in the 1500s, 1600s and calling Chinos. Here we have men in warrior clothes at La Mawolo on South Solor. This is 1929, Indonesia, Indonesian archipelago, the Lamawolo people. And here, real quick, we have the Lamawolo region, right? Look at this volcano right here. Wow, Lamawolo right here, Lamawolo. And where's Lamawolo again? I'm gonna back up. In Lamawolo, as you guys can see, backed up is in Indonesia, Lamawolo, you see? Lamawolo, let's go back to the pic. Indonesians from Lamawolo. Let me show you, close up, look at their hair, right? Look at him, he don't play, and then look at him, he's chilling, all right? He's chilling. Here we have a native Sinhalese woman making lace, old Ceylon postcard. Says here lace making Ceylon in the postcard. I'm gonna zoom into her so you guys can see. To me, she looks very much like many North American women I see growing up in Boston and different parts of the US. You know, what's the difference? Just look at her. You guys be honest with yourselves, right? And she's from Ceylon, Sinhalese. This is a Sinhalese indigenous woman. She's not from Africa. This is a postcard from Ceylon. Nayar females from India, Hindu. All right, very cool image. When I colorized it, I was just like, wow, look at them. Looking like a lot of people, again, I know in Americas. This is a very cool picture I found here. As soon as I saw it in black and white, I was like, oh, I got to colorize this one. It says, newlywed woman in fully party costume, tanning bar, Maluku Islands. Remember the Maluku Islands, Indonesia. This is an Indonesian woman, original, indigenous woman from the Maluku Islands, the Tanimbar region, Indonesia, archipelago. Take a good look. The slave trade to Manila ran well because the Portuguese had trading networks. Remember the Port Jews, they had networks. Remember they had this network of trading back and forth all over the world. We read about this. They had a trading network to supply their own colonial possessions with slaves, particularly Goa and Macau. long before the Iberian Union, long before that. They were already doing that since the 1300s, 1400s. Listen to what they're telling you. According to the Spaniard Juan de Rivera, Portuguese in India had more slaves than any other nation of the world. Portuguese, these were black folks. Hyperbole, notwithstanding, the typical Portuguese in Goa had 10 slaves. These slaves were from regions as far away as Mozambique and Japan. The life story of Anton Rosado, who was born in Goa and died in Mexico, testifies to the reach and workings of the Portuguese Indies trade. The Portuguese brought his ancestors together. In Anton's own words, his paternal grandfather had been Captain General of the fleet in Goa, a great gentleman who died on his way back to Portugal from India. His grandmother was a slave from Mozambique, and his maternal grandparents were slaves from Trinidad in the Maluku Islands. Maluku, his grandma. For many years, he worked as a servant of Portuguese soldiers, traveling with them by land and sea to places such as Cochin and Ceylon. And one day in Manila, his employer sold him unjustly into slavery, and he ended up on board the galleon bound for Acapulco. That's in Mexico, all right? That's the one story of this Anton Rosado. Now, very interesting. A lot of you are going to say, you see Curimeo, Mozambique, that's Africa. Well, okay, yeah, there was some there from Eastern Africa, Eastern, not West Africa, as they told us, Eastern, some. But as you guys can see, people in the Maluku Islands too. His maternal grandparents were from the Maluku Islands, and these were black folks, so-called Negros. Stop trying to Africanize everybody. Please stop trying to Africanize everybody. Here we have Moluccas or Moluccus, the Moluccas people. Remember, the Portuguese were taking whole villages. They were going to the Moluccas natives and taking them and enslaving them. Well, here's your Moluccas. This is the people they were grabbing, bringing to the Americas. So-called Negro people, not Africans. A whole slave trade they left out of history. A whole Middle Passage they really didn't teach us about. We have a Papuan Gulf warrior. A Papuan Gulf warrior in traditional ethnic jewelry, all right? This is an Asian, so-called Chino, right? So-called Chino. Look at his feather headdress. All right, what is the connection with that and us here in America? Oraung Kuli female, an aboriginal from the Shokta Nagpur region of India. We just read. What were they doing to they were carrying whole villages away of people that look like her. People that look like her. Not Hindus how you picture them today. People that look like her. Bringing them to the Americas. Whole villages. A major slave trade here that they swept under the rug, and they didn't really explain it to us correctly. Here we have Pakoy Alam, the fourth of the Principality of Pakoy Alam from the Jakarta, Central Java. This is from 1870, all right? Javanese, more Swarti Javanese indigenous people, and this is royalty, all right? What happened? They don't look like that now. Here we have a Papua New Guinea man, okay? A Papua New Guinea man. Check out the claw or tooth he has on his hair coming down. Look at that. That's pretty cool. Nice picture. I was able to colorize, showing the color, the grass in the background. He's on some hills or something like that, it appears. Very cool picture, as you guys can see. And these are same people they were bringing to Manila, right? Slave market, and bringing to America, classifying them as Chinos. The Portuguese traded slaves as part of their Indies trade system, Comercio de India a India, which stretched from East Africa to Japan. Continues, says Portuguese traders traveled from port to port, usually starting in Goa and stopping in Malacca or the Malacu, Macau, Nagasaki, and back again. After 1580, Manila became one more port of call. Portuguese traders would, for example, acquire white and brown sugar, tortoiseshell and gold in the Philippines, and then take this merchandise to Malacca to exchange for slaves and cloth. They would then continue on to other ports and repeat the pattern of selling and acquiring new commodities along the way. The Indies trade was largely a private venture rather than being part of the royal routes, carretas, that connected India back to Europe. Some Portuguese traders were full-time merchants. Others were soldiers or sailors who were allowed to engage in a little trading on the side as an inducement to work in the far reaches of the Portuguese seaborne empire. One such Portuguese soldier tried to make some profit by bringing a slave from Bengal named Miguel to sell in Manila, but Miguel ran away soon after arriving in the Philippines. For the most part, however, Portuguese traders transported large numbers of slaves and sold them in Manila in lots. Some more Papua New Guinea tribal men here in their village, as you guys can see. All right, zoom in a little bit. Really good. What we're looking at here, you got to break the spell. All right, look at all the people back here, all Swarti people, indigenous people, and these are not Africans, guys. You got to break the spell. I know some of you take that as personal or disrespectful, but it's nothing like that. I'm trying to help you open your eyes. I'm trying to help you break the spell. They lied to us, guys. They lied to us big time. Here's some more Papa Island men, Papua. All right. And what's interesting about this is that it looks like he actually has a head here. Knowing that there was headhunters, well, possibly that might likely be a head right there. It says in the Torres Strait. You can see Swarti. All right, let me zoom into the children right here so you guys can see. Right? These are the children. Again, these ain't Africans. These are Papua New Guineans, indigenous people. They've been there thousands and thousands of years. Another Papua New Guinea man. All right, this is a very cool picture. Have a clear perspective. Use your senses, right? Not everybody that looks like this person is coming out of Africa. Slaves traveled far with their Portuguese captors, who acquired chattel in places throughout the Indian Ocean world, not Africa. The Bay of Bengal, for example, was an important source of slaves for the Portuguese. They allied with the king of Arakan to carry out joint slaving expeditions in the early 17th century. The rise of slave raiding in the region of Bengal correlated with Arakanese military expansion, as well as heightened Dutch demands for slave labor. According to French traveler Francois Bernier, the Portuguese entered the numerous arms and branches of the Ganges in light galleys and carried away entire villages. Listen, this is not in Africa they were doing this. And these people are not like how the Hindus you picture today. These are so-called Negro people that you would say these are Africans, but they weren't from Africa. And listen to what they were doing, these Portuguese, other Negroes. This is more and more war. Shout out to 432 The Drop Radio, Con Drop. Again, these Portuguese entered numerous arms and branches of the Ganges, as river, right, in India, and light galleys and carried away entire villages. This is a whole slave trade they didn't tell us about. They didn't really emphasize because they wanted everybody to think they were from Africa. These captives were then sold to passing traders who bought whole cargoes at a cheap rate. Whole cargoes of people at a cheap rate. And here we have another Papua New Guinea man. All right. And it's so cool about them is that they really rock the feathers a lot. They have a lot of the headdresses. As you can see, this person, very Swarti, so-called Negro from Papua New Guinea. Here we have more Papua New Guinea tribal people. I thought it was a cool picture to colorize when I saw it in black and white. And many people would imagine these are Africans if they didn't know, if they just found this image on the internet. They would say, oh, look at these Africans, right? They're not Africans. I'm going to keep emphasizing that. I hope you guys get that clear now. Catch up to my previous videos. We've already debunked the out of Africa theories. Please take the time. Some more Papua New Guinea warriors from the Mangdan Astrolabe Bay, taken around the year 1900s with spears and shields. All right, I'm going to zoom in right here. You guys can take a look. A Papuan Gulf tribesman. So there's Papua and then there's Papua New Guinea, right? It's split in half. So this is the northern part, Papuan, and this is what they look like as well, the indigenous people there. Again, remember, this was in black and white picture. This is an older picture, just looks pretty cool. I was able to enhance it and everything. And, this is what we get. Here we have people from the Lombok, West, Nusa Tenggara, and the Maluku Island regions, Indonesian archipelago, all right? These are the people they never told us about. These are the same people, the Portuguese, these Portuguese slave raiders were bringing to the Americas. These people would eventually be classified as Chinos. We have here a Filipino woman. This is an indigenous Filipino woman. Okay, just take a good look at her. All right, guys, take a really good look at her. Again, she looks like many people I grew up seeing in North America. I don't know, that's just my opinion. So-called Negro woman, right? But this is an indigenous person from the Philippines. All right, so we continue in the book Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, from Chinos to Indians, Muslim captives, and just war slavery. When the Spaniards first arrived, they were astounded to find that Muslims, Spain's traditional enemies, inhabited large parts of the Philippines archipelago. All right, so the Spanish, I mean the Catholics, when they got there, they were like, man, there's Muslims over here already. All right, they didn't get there with the Portuguese and the Spanish guys. They was already there. The Spaniards' deep-seated animosity toward Muslims, Moros, right, Moors, was harbored during the centuries-long reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula. At the time of contact, Spaniards had only recently taken over the Emirate of Granada, 1492, the last Muslim stronghold. Spanish colonists even posited that they were the direct descendants of the Muslims who had been banished from Spain. In reality, merchants and missionaries from Borneo and the Maluku Islands introduced Islam to the region starting in the mid-14th century, all right? 200 years later, most of Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago were fully part of the Islamic world, Dar al-Islam, okay? And Islam had also made significant inroads in the islands of Cebu and Bohol, all right? So we've been seeing a lot of these pictures today, and you see a lot of these people are Muslim. They have the turbans on and everything. These are the original. These are very swarthy Asiatic Muslims, right? In contrast, people in Luzon and Visayas had only recently begun to convert. Not coincidentally, these were the islands that became the core of the Spanish Philippines. The presence of Islam, in other words, determined Spaniards' missionary and military success. The regions that were fully Islamized never experienced Spanish colonization, but rather remained under the sovereignty of Muslim chiefs who fought Spanish incursions at every turn. The Spaniards engaged in direct conflict with Muslims from circa 1565 to 1663, the so-called Moro Wars or the Moor Wars. But they achieved few victories and subsequently settled into a kind of stalemate through the 19th century. During the height of the fighting, the Moro Wars netted hundreds of captives who were sold in the Manila slave market. Some of these men, once they forcibly accepted baptism, were taken to Mexico. All right? They were taken to Mexico. Who? Moors. Muslim Moors, okay? I want you guys to really understand what they're telling us here. Here we have a photo of the Aeta children of the Philippines, the Aeta tribe, A-E-T-A, in case you guys want to study them. And again, they try to say these people are African when you go into these mainstream narratives, right? Just because the way they look right here. But these, again, indigenous Filipinos, the Aeta, ancient. They're very ancient in this area, Philippines. No proof of them being from Africa. Stop making things up. Here we have a Polynesian girl. Very rare picture I was able to find. Colorized. Even where I got this photo in the website, it was like a blog is saying how you don't see this image of Polynesia anymore. Hard to find this type of people. Even on that website, they were saying it. And, it was a black and white picture. And I was like, yeah, let me colorize this. And just look what we found here. Here we have a portrait of a Batak woman. Remember the Batak people? From 1870, Northern Sumatra, Indonesia. Northern Sumatra, Indonesia. All right? Northern Sumatra, Indonesia. Take a good look. And here we have a portrait of a girl from the Calanasan, Apayao, Northern Luzon, Philippines region. As you guys can see, so swarthy. All right? Filipino, indigenous Filipino. Here we have a portrait of a public dancer in Bali. As you guys can see, so swarthy. This is an up-close picture of her. This is from far away again. She's not of African ancestry. From the Spaniards' perspective, the Muslims had a capital enmity against Christians that justified the wars against them. back in Spain and now in the Philippines. In their words, that conflict was part of an epic battle against the multiplication of the evil sect in the islands and countries of the East. Spaniards had to pacify Mindanao to stop missionaries from Borneo who preached the false doctrine of Muhammad. Oh, all right, and we've shown a lot of pictures of Mindanao today. The vitriolic language used to describe the depredation of the cursed Moros, who were accused of plundering Spanish churches with infernal fury, testifies to the fever that drove the Spaniards to continue their reconquista halfway around the world. Slaving was central to the fight against Islam in the Philippines, just as it had been during the Reconquista. Spanish colonists first enslaved a number of Muslim traders who came to Cebu in the 1560s, all right, 1500s, okay, guys? Claiming they had wanted to spread Islam. The crown approved of their efforts, but with an important caveat. Muslims could be enslaved so long as they were truly of the Muslim nation, rather than very recent converts. The natives of the region under Spanish control, who had already converted to Christianity, had to be protected from enslavement, even if they were originally Muslim. Muslims from regions outside of Spanish jurisdiction were enemies, who could be enslaved as punishment for impeding the predication of the gospel. Okay, so they just enslaving all these people, anybody who's Muslim especially. There's a whole history, again, they don't really teach us. These people, again, are being sent through a middle passage, right, in the Pacific Ocean over to the Americas and other Spanish colonies around the world. The mortar wars netted thousands of slaves for soldiers on the side of Spain, okay? Thousands of slaves from the Moors that they were grabbing here in Southeast Asia, as well as for the Muslim chiefdoms. In fact, much of the fighting consisted of skirmishes and coastal raiding by both parties. Slaving motivated Spanish soldiers and their Indian allies, who went into battle with the express purpose of acquiring slaves. Spanish sources suggest that soldiers enslaved more than 4,000 Muslims between 1599 and 1604 alone. Most of these captives were sold in the Manila slave market. Again, the Manila galleons were going to the Americas, guys. In the late 1630s, a Muslim chief from Maguindanao spoke of the danger of falling prey to Spanish soldiers and urged his followers to fight back. Don't you understand that subjection would reduce you to a toilsome slavery under the Spaniards? Turn your eyes to the defeated nations. Look at the Tagalogs and Visayans. Don't you see the Spaniards trample them? Don't you see that they are made to work every day at the oars and in the cultivations? All right, in the what? In the plantations? Don't you see, guys? This call to action articulates the fear that drove the soldiers on both sides, partly for profit but also for defense. Muslim soldiers enslaved thousands of their opponents, one time carrying away 2,500 Christianized Indians. The captives taken by the Muslims were mainly used as agricultural workers or sold in foreign slave markets, such as in Dutch Batavia, present-day Jakarta, where officials from the Dutch East Indian Company acquired laborers for their spice plantations in the Maluku Islands. Here we have a portrait of two inhabitants of Flores, the Flores Islands, remember, the Maluku Indonesian archipelago, possibly from the Ikat village Negela before 1938. Let's zoom in on these two gentlemen and look at them, all right? Very swarthy, look at their phenotypes, all right? So-called Chinos, so-called Chinos, right? They were bringing to the Americas. Here we have a portrait of two women from the west coast of Sumatra, West Sumatra, around 1880 to 1908, all right? Two women from Sumatra, look at them, wow, and look at their gear. Again, when we're talking about Star Wars, where they get the idea for Star Wars and all these clothing, these gears, these costumes in these movies, look at them. Here we have a postcard depicting a Malay girl modeling the latest clothing design, National Archives of Singapore. All right, a Malay girl modeling the latest clothing design. She's in fashion. Princess Tule of the Tonga, Fiji Island. Princess Tule of the Tonga, Fiji Island. And I saw that on a comment. Somebody said, this is my great something grandmother of Princess Tule. So the information was there. I was able to copy that. And Fiji, you know, the Fiji Islanders, they rock the froze. That's part of their culture. Here we have Raja of Silana, Rajput Silana. This is from India, Hindu. All right, check him out. Yeah, look at him. Here we have another Hindu woman, a Rajputi. That's her name, from 1865. All right, very, very swarthy. Here we have a Rongan dancer, Betawi, previously Batavia. This is in Jakarta, Java. This is a Javanese dancer, all right, with her Javanese servants or something. Look at that. Look how swarthy they are. Again, they don't show us Javanese like this today. Look at her. She looked like a princess. Governor Sebastian Hurtado de Corcuera led some of the more dramatic confrontations against the Muslims. In 1638, his men took hundreds of captives in Jolo. 192 of them were later sold at auction in Manila for a total of 20,815 silver pesos. Among the many captives was a child named Pedro de Mendoza. All right, listen to this, guys. Who years later sued for his freedom in Spain. He went all the way to Spain. That's where they had brought him, right? In 1655, he petitioned the Council of the Indies in Seville for his liberty, claiming that Corcuera had illegally enslaved him. Pedro said he was an Indian from the Philippines, not from America, and reminded the judges all Indians are naturally free according to royal decree. In his defense, Corcuera explained that as governor, he had personally led troops into Mindanao and Jolo to vanquish Muslims. After a major battle in 1638, he had taken responsibility of more than 200 children, all under 4 years of age, whom the enemy had left behind. Corcuera had the children baptized and taken to Manila, where he distributed them among upstanding citizens to be raised as Christians. All right, you hear that, guys? He also kept several of these children in his own household and then brought them to Spain. According to Corcuera, these individuals, including Pedro, were legal slaves because they had been captured in a just war against Muslims, and the enslavement of women and children in a just war was fully allowed under Spanish jurisprudence. Corcuera also claimed that Pedro de Mendoza's real name was Pedro Jolo. He was not an Indian, but a Muslim slave, with a brand on his face to prove it. To pressure the point, Corcuera presented the court with a copy of the royal decree from 1635 that had ordered him to punish the people of Mindanao and Jolo. It is not known whether Pedro regained his freedom, but his case certainly attests to the reach of the slaving campaigns of the Moor Wars. Notably, several other captives from Corcuera expedition emerged in the historical record, including Salvador Sanchez from Mindanao, who was finally freed by the same soldiers who had captured him and taken him to Mexico City as his personal servant decades earlier. The slaving expeditions reached beyond the Philippines archipelago to places such as the Mariana Islands, then called Islas Chamures or Islas de los Ladrones. Spanish soldiers claimed that Muslims made frequent forays there to capture the natives who died in their service. They had a better idea to capture the said natives before they fell into the enemy hands. The soldiers planned to have the captives baptized and then send them to Mexico to work in the mines for the greater service of God. In this petition to the king, the soldiers specifically linked the role of slavery in bringing unbelievers to Christianity and away from the Muslim chieftains. They requested license to carry out slaving raids by employing the major justification used to enslave people in other parts of the world, specifically West Africa. All right, that's the hijack. Which ones? Show me the sources. This request, moreover, testifies to the slaving economy that developed as a result of the struggle between Christians and Muslims for political control of this remote part of the world. We have 3 unidentified Samoan girls wearing traditional Samoan clothing, a bit more zoomed in so you guys can see, get a good look at some Samoans, indigenous Samoans. Let me back up again. Samoans, huh? Some more Samoans, all right? Let me zoom in. Let me see. All right, so swarthy, so-called Negro, and your so-called Chinos. These are the people they were labeling Chinos. Here we have a Tingian woman from the Philippines. Philippines. Just look at her. Take a good look at her. Philippines, right? Filipino, indigenous Filipino. Here we have a Toda woman in India. A Toda woman from India. Very swarthy. Look at her hair. Very curly and wavy. Here we have a Toda woman from the Nilgiri Hills in India. Again, a Toda woman. Hindu woman from India. So swarthy. Tu Suk Dos Bairagi people. Hindu religious mendicant from Allahabad, India. And look what he's doing. Let me show you. He got his feet up. Look how he's bent up. Who taught him that stuff? Check it out, guys. Hindu. Look at it, guys. This is an awesome picture right here. Look how he's bent. He ain't even feeling it. No sweat. Look how he's bent. And he got his arms folded like, what? What? Here we have two children of the former Secretary of War, Asep Panglina. Indonesia, all right? Indonesian children. Look how beautiful they look. Look at this awesome pic, all right? Here we have two women from Ambon City, the Maluku Islands in Indonesia, all right? You see that? Your so-called Chinas. So swarthy. Maluku Islands, Indonesia. Indonesians, original Indonesians. Here we continue in the book, Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico, Chinos to Indios. Chapter 3, it says here the rise and fall of the Trans-Pacific slave trade. In 1635, a young man from Malabar coast in India, all right, a Hindu, right, named Antonio, arrived in Acapulco on board the ship Nuestra Señora de la Limpia Concepción, all right, so Antonio, huh? So he's a Hindu named Antonio, you know, they kind of gave him that name most likely. And now this reminds me of another Antonio that arrived in 1619 in Virginia, right, Antonio. His master, a Spanish resident of Cavite in the Philippines, had asked a sailor on the ship to take Antonio with him and sell Antonio on his behalf. The sale price upon landing was 200 pesos, paid by a slave trader who turned around and sold Antonio in Mexico City for almost double the price. The surviving documentation that details Antonio's journey from Asia to Mexico reveals the many steps and intermediaries who were involved in the Trans-Pacific slave trade, as well as the profits that drove this commerce. From the late 1560s through the early 1700s, all right? That's a lot of years, guys. Individual traders brought slaves from the Philippines to Mexico aboard the ships of the Manila galleons. Remember, these are all kinds of Southeast Asians and Hindus and all that are being sent to the Manila or the Philippine slave market to be transported from there to the Americas, okay? This chapter examines the Trans-Pacific trade during a key period of transition for the larger slave trade to Spanish America. Enslavers dealt in people from Asia and Africa, so-called Africa, right? The slaves who crossed the Pacific were part of much larger influx of slaves to Spanish America, much larger. As such, their story must be examined in the context of Spain's effort, beginning in the 16th century, to supply the colonies with slave labor. The Wayang, Orang, and Java. These are Javanese. This is a theater performance, I believe. A lot of theater stuff here coming out of Java. I guess they were into that a lot. As you guys can see, all these people swarthy complexion, right? Here we have women from Ambon Island, the Ambon Island, Indonesia, Ambon. So-called Negro people as well, very swarthy. Again, these are your so-called Chinos, Chinas they were bringing over to the Americas, Ambon Islanders. Here we have Filipino Negritos, the Porag region, they said, from the Philippines. Here we have a young man from Java or Javanese, Batavia, Jakarta is called today, South Pacific. Very swarthy young fellow, Javanese, as you guys can see, very swarthy Javanese. Here we have two girls from the Tonga, and I believe that was the Samoan or Fiji Islands. As you guys can see, so swarthy. Look at their hair, their traditional clothing. Here we have a Samoan woman, and look at the leaves on her clothing and stuff. When I colorized it, I was like, wow, really cool, really cool. All right, Samoan, right? Samoan, what you talking about, The Rock? Here we have Sinhalese women, Ceylon, Sinhalese Ceylon. All right, Sri Lanka. Here we go on the Sumin. All right, look at her here on the left. Look at her all the way here in the left, in the middle. You see their phenotypes? And again, looks like people I've seen in the Americas, guys. Just my opinion. Ceylon Sinhalese, original indigenous Sinhalese women. Here we have a Singpho, a woman, warlike frontier tribe on Laos, southern frontier of Assam. Southern frontier of Assam. This is from India. This is from India, Hindu woman. India. Look at that. Here I have Southeast Asian children, not sure what country, but it was in this website where it said Southeast Asians. And they got almost like their Muslim gear, right? Like their Muslim gear on. As you guys can see, so swarthy. I mean, not from Africa, no African ancestry. These are indigenous Southeast Asians, okay, guys? Here we have an old photo of the Tufi warriors from pre-1920 with shields, and it's colorized here for you guys. Look at this. So Tufi warriors, Southeast Asians. I believe this is in Papua New Guineans or New Caledonians. Papua New Guinea, I believe so. Actually more. Yeah, Tufi warriors. Look at that. All right, so-called Negros. And again, they don't show us none of these pictures growing up. They just wanted us to picture Asians in a certain way. But I want you guys from now on, when you picture Asia, picture this. This is Asia. All right, so I just wanted to show this to you guys. It says here the Manila galleon journey east. And you see from the Philippines, again, another middle passage. This is the Trans-Pacific slave trade. Yeah, and you can see that it was going over to, at times, to California. All right, so I was showing you earlier in Acapulco, a tourist destination today, but it was a slave market, you know, back in the 1500s, 1600s, for all these people in Southeast Asia. It says here the galleon was part of an empire-wide system of royally sponsored navigation routes or runs, carreras, which aimed to regulate trade flows and also protect ships from pirates. In this capacity, the Manila galleon was sometimes referred to as the Eastern Islands Run, Carrera de las Islas del Poniente. On the way to Mexico, the ships carried bales of Chinese silks and Indian cottons, porcelain, spices, and wax. They returned laden with silver. As a royal route, there were restrictions on the volume of the ship's cargo, known as the permiso. The enforcement of these cargo restrictions, however, was not notoriously slack, and it was common for galleons to carry merchandise worth 4 times the official allowance. Despite the dangers of overloading, merchants and officials connived to falsify ship registries and embark with as much merchandise as possible on sealed crates, tinajas. One Spaniard threatened before the 1620 voyage to Mexico that he would stab any passenger found opening his crates, even if his name was Christ. Generalized fraud was commonplace throughout the galleon's history. Right here we have some children, more children, in their tribal dress from Indonesia. Indonesia in their tribal dress from Indonesia. You see her, what she looked like? Look at the gear they got on, especially her. Look at her. She's, wow. I mean, just look at the clothing, their styles, the art, the designs on their clothes. Okay. Again, some children from Indonesia. And right here, we have a Coolie family in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad, a Coolie family. So Hindus that were brought over to South America. All right, this is them. This is them in Trinidad. It says a family in the Coolie village, Trinidad. The Coolie village in Trinidad. If you guys know the history, you guys know what I'm talking about. Some more people from New Caledonia, like I said, you know, and again, these people do not trace back to Africa. Novo Caledonia. All right, Kanakis. Kanakis, these are the indigenous people, the Kanakis. Okay, this is Malayans. These are some Malays, I believe. Yeah, these are from Malaysia. Again, Southeast Asians. This is a more modern picture. This is from the 1900s, I believe. So they still look like that there. This is a young Hindu woman from Bombay, 1865. 1865, a Hindu. These are the slaves that they were bringing, the Moors that they were bringing from Asia. The passage across the Pacific from Manila to Acapulco was extremely long and dangerous. The ships had to navigate against major currents with only the assistance of wind and rowing power. The trip from Manila to Acapulco could take up to 6 months, exposing the ships to endless storms and inclement weather. The Italian traveler Giovanni Gemelli Carreri wrote vividly about his tedious and dreadful voyage in 1696. There was hunger, thirst, sickness, cold, continued watching, and other sufferings, besides the terrible shocks from side to side caused by the furious beating of the waves. To add to the miseries, the ship swarmed with little vermin of sundry colors, so the passengers were never clear of an universal itch. There was nothing to do day after day except keep clear of the currents of water that poured over every inch of the ship. Gemelli may have bitterly complained, but he was a cabin passenger, which meant that he had a place to hide away from the general squalor of the ship. He also had a slave who cooked his food and tended more generally to his comfort. The conditions endured by Gemelli's slave and the rest are almost unimaginable, okay? Unimaginable. Middle passage here, guys, that they never tell us about. Hernando de los Rios Coronel wrote numerous reports over his many years as Attorney General, Procurador General of the Spanish Philippines about the workings of the Manila galleon, and the transport of slaves was a regular concern. In 1605, he reported of the many offenses to God that took place on board because passengers and sailors regularly took female slaves as their personal companions. He thought it particularly disgraceful that slave owners shared the women among other travelers. 15 years later, Rios Coronel reported once again on this evil, stressing that the presence of female slaves angered God and led to many disasters. All right, see what they're doing to the women. He knew of one official who had taken 15 such slaves, all of whom he had gotten pregnant during the voyage. Oh man, causing generalized outrage among his fellow passengers. The king was incensed. The trafficking of female slaves was an affront to God that required an urgent response. In 1608, he ordered officials in Manila to prevent any female slaves from boarding the ships, noting that the voyage was long and dangerous. The king also commanded that all female passengers had to be married to ensure their protection. As with other prohibitions, however, the barring of women from the Manila galleons was wholly ignored, so that approximately 1/4 of the slaves who crossed the Pacific were women. In 1620, the king noted with concern that female slaves were still making the journey across the Pacific, even though it was expressly forbidden. Accordingly, he ordered the judges of the Audiencia of Manila, the High Court, to pay particular care at the time of departure to ensure that such slaves were not hidden on board the ships. The concern with the trans-Pacific trade extended beyond morality. Coronel also reported on the overcrowding of the galleon with the male slaves, who ate all the provisions, stole from the passengers, and generally added to the ship's unsanitary conditions. This is a man from Papua New Guinea. All right, from Papua New Guinea. Again, Southeast Asian, and this person does not trace back to Africa. And again, it's weird because the Khoisan look more Asian than him, right? The Khoisan are lighter than him, and they look way more Asian than him. But they're African. They're one of the oldest Africans. So that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. We got to stop basing what we think of people based only on looks. Yeah, that might, help out in a big way most of the time, but we may be wrong a lot of the time. This is a Hindu man. This is an Indian Hindu, right, who was in the West Indies. And look what he has, dreadlocks. And I noticed that a lot of these Hindus they were bringing had a lot of dreadlocks. Remember, this is from the 1800s. This is way before the whole Rastafari movement. So where did these Rastafaris really get the dreadlock idea from? Even though we know, we've seen the murals in Mexico, we've seen the Mayas, we've seen a lot of these, depicting people with, dreadlocks. All right, so we know that's old. So again, I'm asking the same question because we know we had Mayas with dreadlocks and we have Hindus with dreadlocks. So where did the Rastafaris really get the idea for dreadlocks and all that, you know? Because Hindus were doing it from ages, and the Mayas were doing it too. It's not an African thing only. This is a Hindu woman. As you see in the bottom, it says East Indian woman and child, Trinidad, British West Indies. She's from Trinidad, but she's a Hindu. All right. Again, the book told us they were bringing the slaves from where? From the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. This is a Tamil girl, Ceylon, Sri Lanka. She is from Sri Lanka. Look at that. She's from Sri Lanka, from Ceylon. Her clan or tribe is the Tamil people of Sri Lanka. The Manila galleon's high mortality provides some sense of the discomforts and very real dangers of the crossing. The ships were filled with cargo, so that even the decks teetered with crates, leaving little room for the common sailor and slaves to sleep or seek shelter from the rain. It was said that common sailors were not even given clothes to protect them against the cold during the nights, so there were usually 3 or 4 deaths with each new dawn. You hear what's going on in this middle passage, guys? This ain't no Kunta Kinte story. This is real history. As an example, in 1629, the one ship that sailed experienced a loss of 100 people. 100 people died on the way, and I'm showing you these pictures, guys. These are the people. These are so-called Black Asiatics. Many of their bodies were actually kept on board until they arrived in Acapulco, adding to the ship's insalubrious conditions. The bodies of the dead remained on the ship so that they could be taken to sanctified ground for proper burial as dictated by custom. The parish in Acapulco even had set price scale for burials at arrival, 10 pesos for Spaniards, 5 for Indians, and 1 for slaves. After months at sea, the ships first sighted land off the coast of California, where they traded with local peoples for fresh food, all right? Where? Cali. Where they bringing these people first? Cali. They traded with local peoples for fresh food to combat the scurvy and beriberi that often ravaged the passengers. From there, the ships followed the coast southward, making additional stopovers before finally reaching their official destination. These stops were only intended to take on emergency provisions and to send messengers ahead to notify officials in Acapulco and Mexico City to their impending arrival. News of the galleon caused great excitement in Mexico City. A contemporary reported that the announcement on February 21st, 1650, was celebrated with cathedral bell tolls, and again on March 2nd when the ship was sighted from Acapulco. However, brief, the coastal stops provided opportunities for some illegal unloading of goods, which further suggests that the volume of the slave trade was higher than what was noted in the official registries. Guys, I'm going to read that again because they try to, sugarcoat this. They're telling you right here they couldn't keep track. They stopped everywhere along the coast to do illegal unloading, right, of slaves, which further suggests again that the volume of the slave trade was higher than what was noted in the official registries, and that was told to us in our elementary schools and what was told to us in our education system. It was a lot higher. Okay, guys? I have her. She's a Malaysian. We're brothers and sisters. But yeah, she's a Malaysian. Southeast Asia. This is another Tamil woman. I didn't colorize this one. It was already colorized. Tamil woman from Sri Lanka. All right. Again, this is the original people in these areas. And we have a statue of Buddha from Thailand here. A statue of Buddha from Thailand. As you can see, the hair from Thailand, 800 AD. And honestly, some of these look like the Dinka people in Africa. So where do they really originate? A lot of the tribes in Africa, again, don't originate in Africa. They're coming from Asia. They're coming from the Middle East, so-called, Arabia, all these other places. A lot of them coming from Europe. Some of them coming from America, ancient America. A lot of their stories speak of it, of their migration, their past, and how they got to where they are today. Just go do the research. This is a portrait of a Bayadir Devadasi temple dancer from 1857. Again, she's a Hindu. This is from India. This is a Hindu. The Indian subcontinent, that's what the book told us. They were bringing these so-called Asian slaves. The Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, not China. All right. This is what a Southeast Asian or Indian subcontinent person or woman looked like, especially back in the 1500s, 1600s. Remember, these pictures are from the 1800s because that's when camera was invented. Now imagine 200-300 years before that, before people started, or the ethnic cleansing began. Got some more here, Black Buddha and the Israelite Buddhists. It says, in this article, we will identify the Buddha and early Buddhists as descendants of the Hebrew Israelites. Uh-oh. Is that a future video? Who's the Buddha? Who's Quetzalcoatl? Who's Gautama? Who's Gautama Buddha? Who's Guatemala? What's Buddha's mom's name? Maya. Did you know that? Buddha's mom's name is Maya, and his first name is Guatemala. This is a Nagpur in India, a Hindu woman, a Samoan woman. All right, Samoan woman. The correspondence related to the death of hundreds of passengers on the voyage to Mexico in 1620 sheds light on how the illegal boarding of slaves in Manila took place. That year, the Viceroy of Mexico reported to the king that 330 people on board the San Nicolas had perished and suggested that the loss was due to inadequate mannings and inexperienced crew members. All right, over 300 people, all right, died in this middle passage. We're talking about so-called Negro people too, but nobody remembers these people. The crown was understandably concerned and wrote to the governor of the Philippines asking for an explanation. In his response, Governor Alonso Fajardo de Tensa gave a revealing account of the people who had boarded the Manila galleon. He said there had been no irregularities. The San Nicolas had sailed with the accustomed number of officers and the usual seamen and gunners and many more Indians from this country as common seamen. In addition, there had been some slaves belonging to officers and the passengers who were allowed to take them for their service. Governor Fajardo provided this crew and passenger information to dismiss the gravity of the loss of life. In his words, it was clear that as the passengers are usually kept down to as small a number as possible, then those who died were not Spaniards. The people who died had to have been blacks and slaves who were hidden after embarkation by those who took them aboard, with an eye to saving the cost of the duties they owe. He had registered some slaves belonging to officers and passengers with proper licenses, but suggested that many more had stowed away. Fajardo's explanation amounted to an admission that the total number of slaves who regularly boarded the ships superseded the official registrations. There was actually more people, more slaves than they actually wrote down, guys, and that they thus traveled without licenses. The governor was responsible for the proper functioning of the Manila galleon, including its provisions, so Fajardo had to dodge culpability by claiming that those who died from hunger and sickness were not supported to have boarded in the first place. It was a callous explanation, but one that testifies quite frankly to the dangers faced by the slaves who made the crossing. All right, so I think I'm gonna end it right there, guys. I hope you guys understand why I'm doing this series, so you guys can understand. Yeah, nobody's saying that slavery wasn't real. What I'm trying to show you is that the narratives that they told us are not all correct. They purposely switched the stories up and they made everybody into Africans. Now, I've shown you 3 different sources for slaves. These are historic things you can verify. As you guys can see, we've actually covered all the years that, slavery was actually going on in the American colonies. So I'm going to ask you again, what Africans? I might do a part 4. And if I do, it should be a very interesting one. something that most people don't understand. Yes, there was slavery in Africa, but not necessarily how they told us that they were bringing millions of people from West Africa into the Americas. Africa has its own stories and own history on slavery, and we're going to try to cover that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the last 2 installments of this series. Hope it helped you understand certain history. I hope it helps you with your research and it helps you understand certain things when it comes to a true historical, transatlantic, trans-Pacific slave trade. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Take care. Hawa.